I will now call the December 7th, 2022 regular Historic Preservation Committee meeting to order. This meeting has been properly noticed and four members are in attendance, establishing a quorum with Chair Graham absent. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting has been posted in accordance with Nevada open meeting law. All members are present with the exception of Linda Graham. We do have a quorum. First item is the initial public comment period. Public comment during this portion of the agenda must be limited to matters of the agenda for action. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on a specific agenda item. The public may call 702-589-9629 to provide public comment.
Madam Chair, maybe just to clarify, if anybody in the audience wants to speak, to come to the podium and state their name for the record.
So do we do that now, or do we wait till after the phone part is done, or, okay?
Yeah, I would start with that and then just confirm with the phone afterward.
All right, if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to come forward to the podium and provide a comment, please state your name and for the record. Seeing no one has come forward and there are no comments. Oh. Didn't see him. Hello.
Hi, Stuart Adams, Avenue M. Wasn't sure whether to comment now prior to the presentation of the turf removal or to, anyway, in case our presenters may not be here for the whole meeting. I did go to the open house. I did see the conception 30% plan that they had, and I appreciate the Bureau for bringing this forward and for them presenting this to us. It's been tough. They've done this probably 15, 20 years ago. This thing was brought up, and there was a lot of opposition about removing the turf. It's historic. They went through different roads, perhaps the putting rock there and then preventing that from hitting the gutter and going down to Adams Boulevard as it had in the past and perhaps still is. Then I think the most that I saw that they had done is they changed the irrigation rotors to these little MP3s that put out a little bit less water, not getting the flow that we did, and then they did that little test garden on the corner. Not sure if they're going to keep the Palo Verdes, but it looks like the turf is going to be going away. I saw the plan that they had, and it's a lot of pretty much the same stuff that we see around town, the Chinese pistache. They do have a few natives, desert-adapted plants. And we've seen that some of these so-called desert-adapted plants have failed as the temperature's gone up. Since my time here, the ashes, they struggle, and it's not a very good shade tree. As far as being a historic meeting, of course, there's nothing historic. I don't expect to see Siberian elms or mulberries or anything like the such on there. Their concept, I do understand, is They have the pistache for the shade trees that we used to have. And of course, no mulberries, but, and then they've got, some of the other stuff that we see everywhere. I would prefer to see all native, Mojave natives. I mean, we really, they would just thrive in our soil. Very pretty, no water, very low maintenance. Pretty much what they gave us in the triangles, 60, 70, 80 years ago would be that representative. Saw pictures from Nipton the other day, the drive down to Nipton. I mean, just a snapshot of that, when you drive down to Nipton through that little Josh report, that could be up on the hillside right there. It's very pretty. So I would hope that they're going for perhaps not just a small native plant material, but all Mojave natives. And let's celebrate the Mojave Desert with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Okay. So again, seeing that there are no more comments, we'll close the first comment period and go to agenda item 1. For possible action, approval of the minutes of the October 26, 2022 regular meeting.
Make a motion to accept minutes as printed.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Almost forgot.
Okay. Agenda item number 2, for possible action, presentation by the Bureau of Reclamation about the proposed landscape changes at 1200 Park Street and 500 Date Street. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Let me just get oriented here, make sure this is working. Looks like it is. So good evening. My name is Chad Belinga. I'm a supervisory civil engineer for the Lower Colorado Basin for the Bureau of Reclamation in the Engineering Services Office located in Boulder City, Nevada. I'll be talking about our project to install desert landscaping at the Historic Administration Building and xeriscaping at Building 100 at 500 Date Street. The purpose of this presentation is to share information with you about the project scope and schedule and request your feedback and support. Reclamation announced the project in a press release in November and then followed up with a public open house at the site's administration building in the Regional Directors Conference Room on November 10th from 4 to 6 p.m. The weather was nice and there were an estimated 30 plus people that stopped in to see and comment on the project. Guests were able to see the conceptual rendering and our plans to replace the lawn and desert landscaping. Reclamation management and the design team were there to answer questions and to provide additional detail. Guests were also encouraged to submit their questions and comments in writing, and cards were provided with an email address they could send their questions and comments to. Some of the written comments we have received after the open house suggested things like using only native vegetation and giving the lawn to Boulder City to maintain. We are currently in discussions with the State Historic Preservation Office and will be sending them our written notice of intent, and we would like to have your support for the project and include your recommendations and support in our correspondence with the State Historic Preservation Office. The project includes 2 locations in Boulder City. The first is the site of the Historic Administration Building at 1200 Park Street. The second is at the site of the Historic Engineering Lab, or what now Reclamation refers to as Historic Building 100 at 500 Date Street. Reclamation's goals for this project are: 1, to minimize water use; 2, improve public and employee access to the administration and annex buildings. And on that note, I'd also like to comment that Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act requires that a federal agency with jurisdiction over a proposed federal undertaking consider the effect of the action on buildings and facilities listed in or eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places prior to approving the expenditure of any federal funds. Our third goal is to design the xeriscaping or water-saving landscape and public access to harmonize with neighboring structures. And fourth, to complete the design by the end of December. This is less than 20 days from now. And for construction to begin in February and be completed by June of 2023. Our objectives for this project are to develop a design that is in accordance with Nevada State Law AB 356, and develop a design that meets the requirements of reclamation, the City of Boulder City, and the State Historic Preservation Office. And 3, create a space that will continue to serve as the visual focal point of the community, as well as continue to provide access and gathering spaces. And 4th, create a low maintenance, low water use, and visually appealing space. Here's a conceptual rendering we prepared and presented at the open house on November 10th. This conceptual rendering shows what the desert landscaping could look like. It also shows the accessible pathway from the corner of Park Street and Nevada Way up to the administration building. This is the conceptual rendering, or excuse me, the conceptual site plan that was presented at the open house on November 10th. Here you can see the proposed 8-foot wide sidewalk along Nevada Way from Park Street to Denver Street. You'll also see that we have incorporated meeting areas along the accessible pathway. There are many native desert plants and desert adapted plants to choose from, and this palette shows the diversity of colors and types of plants that we are considering. All these plants have proven to do well in this Mojave Desert climate. And these plants also attract and support birds, bees, and butterflies. Here's a 30% design concept, and this design considerations Reclamation has incorporated in the plan for the purposes of historic preservation and addressing the concerns of the community include keeping elements of the historic built environment, such as the historic staircase, the central sidewalk, existing curb, gutter, and streetlights. Reclamation is also considering using 3 turbine ring artifacts from Hoover Dam to repurpose as planters and other design elements in the landscape, and installing interpretive and educational components throughout the xeriscaping and installing new bench seating areas. And the view from Park Street will remain unobstructed to preserve the view of the administration building. Reclamation intends to hire an interpretive planner, and interpretive panels will be installed along the walkway to convey the history of the administration building and its historic landscape. The purpose of the Xeriscape project and Reclamation's goals of water conservation and to provide information on the flora and fauna in the landscape. Informing users and visitors about the administration building's landscape history will be an imperative part of complying with the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 and is a offsetting mitigation for the removal of the lawn and modifying the historic landscape. It will also highlight the significance of Reclamation's role in the formation of Boulder City while users are experiencing the actual physical space of the history being discussed. Installations could also inform the viewers of the environmental aspects of the landscape and Reclamation's efforts towards water conservation and why the xeriscape is the most water-conscious choice for landscaping in a dry environment. This could be achieved by discussing the native vegetation and the fauna that reside in this environment and highlighting the yearly water usage. Reclamation will also be hiring a specialty lighting designer to assist with selecting unique lighting that will match the physical style of the surrounding xeriscape and the historic feel of Boulder City, and utilize lighting that conforms to any city ordinance or dark sky requirements. This project undertaking also includes xeriscaping of Building 100, the former engineering lab. The site's 3,500 square foot lawn will be removed and replaced with low-lying native vegetation, except for the existing ash tree. It will remain and will be irrigated. The low-lying vegetation will help preserve the view of the historic building. Once the native plants are established, they will not require further irrigation. Major project tasks include constructing a new water service connection in Park Street, clearing and grubbing the site of all the existing turf grass and unhealthy plants and trees, salvaging and reusing the topsoil, installing a new water-smart irrigation system and electrical conduits and conductors, constructing hardscapes like sidewalks and pathways, planting low-maintenance, drought-tolerant, xeriscape landscaping, and backfilling with salvaged topsoil. And then finally placing ground cover like rock mulch. Major project milestones include the public open house that we had on November 10th, this Historic Preservation Commission meeting today, completing the 100% design by the end of December, awarding the construction contract in February, and beginning construction in February of 2023. And our goal is to have construction completed by June of 2023. I'd like to remind everyone that written comments and feedback may continue to be sent to the email address reclamation xeriscapebc@usbr.gov. And at this time, I'd be happy to answer any of your questions and would welcome your input and feedback.
Thank you. I want to start with you, Glenn? No? Tag, you're it.
Well, it looks like. Don't like being first. Looks like a good plan. I know it kind of sucks that the grass has to go away, but I think we all understand it, you know, with the lake levels the way they are and everything else going on. It's kind of we're asking all the public to do a lot of different things. I think, you know, as government should lead by example. I'd much rather see the grass stay there. It really looks nice, but at the same time, I understand things have to be done. It looks like you're gonna make all your attempts to retain what historic parts of the park that the areas can. I don't have too much else to say, except the plans look good. I mean, the renderings are nice, and if it turns out to look that way, I think it'll be a plus to the city. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
No, thank you.
Charlie?
Me? Okay. I've had a couple of things. One of them actually doesn't pertain to this, but I something that bugs me, and you're the first person I've come to I can ask.
Thank you.
When you're at the bottom of the steps going up to the administration building, there's a sign there that says, "Do not enter," essentially. And I don't know why. I ran into a little old lady standing there at the bottom of those steps the other day and says, I can't go up there. I said, well, I go up there. So can't that sign be,
It's,
it's a government sign that says, don't come up here. I mean, it's, anyway, to get on to this, one of the things I'd like to see, and it's mentioned, so I know you guys are cognizant, but I would like to see interpretive signs at multiple plants, okay? Trees, and because I use those signs, because I'm not a botanist, and I like to, because we do a lot of desert landscaping, and I think it's informative to be able to see that this is a brittle bush, or this is a whatever, you know. So I know you're cognizant of that, and so I hope you make adequate use of that. Trees, and I don't think you mentioned rocks. Maybe you did. I think rocks are very important. I'm a geologist.
oh,
So, you know, I hope you find appropriate rocks and place them appropriately. Because I think they really do enhance the landscape, okay? So to me, rocks are important. I have a kind of a curious question here, and by the way, I agree with Stuart Adams. I would like to see, if not all, at least a majority or a significant portion of that park be dedicated to native Mojave plants, rather than just desert-adapted plants, because there is a difference. So the more actual native plants we can use, native to this high desert, I would like to see. So I agree with that assessment. I'm curious about the soil, because we've been told, and well, it's not been told, but it's a fact that in fact, there's pictures of it in some of this stuff, the 14,000 tons of Kentucky soil or something like that. So is that the soil we still have up there now? I mean, that's not desert soil, okay? So we're gonna plant desert soil or desert plants in Kentucky soil. I'm curious about that. I don't know. Maybe they're gonna be really happy because they have Kentucky soil, but I don't intend that we remove 14,000 tons of Kentucky bluegrass soil, but anyway. I was glad to hear you mention dark sky. I do hope the lighting is because lighting is important, and I hope it does comply with the night, with the dark sky. I'm a little curious on the one sheet that's developed. I probably won't be able to find it now, but let me see. Develop design that meets the requirements of reclamation, City of Boulder City, and SHPO. I'm not quite sure exactly what those requirements are. Are they listed somewhere? Is there a list of requirements, or?
that list of requirements, I can speak to that. I've got a number of things here I could go down in order and talk about some of those things. There aren't specific concrete specifications per se, but there are, like with the State Historic Preservation Office, they have certain interests pertaining to the history. Reclamation has interests pertaining to water conservation. Boulder City has interests pertaining to the visual focal point of the community. So when I use when the word requirement is used, maybe that's too strict of a word. It's just,
Okay.
we're trying to take in all of those
Okay, I
concerns.
understand, yeah. I appreciate one of the things in terms of the interpretive signs, that some of those interpretive signs or do talk about historic Boulder City, of course.
Yeah.
You know, so that's important. I had a question about Ash Street. You mentioned something about keeping the this, relative to the Bureau of Mines building, or the, not the Bureau of Mines, but the building on Date. Did you mention Ash Street?
The ash trees.
Oh, ash trees, never mind,
s-
okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's a single ash tree.
Yeah,
and
that's
that-
just old age and poor hearing, so.
Oh,
All right, yeah, I couldn't figure out I didn't think there was any ash, right, okay. Anyway, I appreciate I really do hope you can maximize native plants, but yeah, I agree, I don't like to see the lawn going away, but we live in the desert, we're running out of water, and it's just the way it needs to be, I think, so.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm curious about is people are all up in, I'm not gonna go there, never mind.
Okay, no, well, thank you for those comments. I'd like to just speak to those quickly here. In regards to the sign that's at the bottom of the stairs, I share your feelings with that, and that sign is going to be removed. And so that space becomes more inviting and open to the public. We want to encourage the public to go to that government building. But those signs will be moved up closer to the building. So just as you're right next to the building, there will be some type of an indicator that this is a working government building, access by appointment and stuff. And we will be adding the interpretive panels and plaques for plants so that people can learn the names of the plant and more about it. I'm glad you mentioned the rocks because that's important to us as well. We do have it in our plans. There's some wonderful rocks and boulders that were excavated during the construction of Hoover Dam, and our intention is to collect some of those rocks and bring them up to the site and put them out there for others to see. I think there's some great geology there that could be explained. And I appreciated the comment about having native plants of the Mojave Desert. Looking at our place in the world and its location in the Mojave Desert and the fact that cactuses are, and the desert plants that we have are unique and that they can only be found in this place in the world. And I think, like you, that should be celebrated. And the soil, we don't know the soil, but it came from Kentucky. We know that Abraham Lincoln was from Kentucky, and if that Kentucky soil can produce somebody like Abraham Lincoln that came from nothing, hey, there's got to be something there. But I know from my own gardening experience that if if there is some type of a mulch or some type of existing topsoil that we can use in the backfill of the plants, that could help to conserve water by saving it. So. Hey, that might be an option. As far as the dark skies go, yes, we'll certainly be looking at that
Yeah, that's good.
in relationship also like with the migratory birds and such. And then we've spoken about the requirements and the ash tree. So yes, thank you for your comments, and yes, we'll continue to factor
Thank
those
you,
into our
thank you for the
decisions.
presentation.
Chad, thank you very much for the great presentation.
Oh, thank you.
I was at the public open house and I really like the conceptual plan. I think it's going to be great for Boulder City. I'm looking forward to watching that happen. Again, yeah, the local native plants, yeah, it sounds like you guys are going to be very conscientious of that. I have a question about the historic staircase and the railing. If the railing that's currently there, I don't know if it's original or not, or?
No.
No, okay.
No, originally there was no railing.
Okay. And the plan, I understand, is to have a railing on both sides?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Similar to what the park has done on their side
Yeah.
in Wilbur Square. They've put railings that conform to the Architectural Barriers Act, and we would do something similar to that. But
Very good.
again, our goal is to preserve and protect the stairs, the curb and gutter. That curb and gutter was put in it was graded with a mule team. And the work was done by hand, and that geometry and that layout is just incredible. So yes, we will take extreme effort to preserve and protect that infrastructure, those built elements.
Great. And I also have another question. So the concrete stairs themselves have developed an interesting looking patina. And so I'm wondering, are you guys planning to leave that as is, or is there any kind of plans to clean that up or attempt to clean that up? Or,
You know,
I mean, I'd like to see it stay the way it is.
I'm glad you asked that question, because I don't know the story behind that patina. If that's, it does look different than the other concrete, but that's,
Yeah.
I
I always liked it myself, you know, so I was
agreed.
curious about that also.
Agreed, yeah. But ultimately, the goal is to preserve and protect those stairs. And by having this universally accessible pathway, that will be a mitigating factor to help preserve those stairs. And just kind of a side note too, regarding the stairs, I don't know if you guys know this, but Hoover was referred to as Project 45, and if you go up the stairs, there's 35 stairs, and they all add up to 45. So there's some neat history there.
All right, very good. Thanks very much, Chad.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Chad, for your comments. Speaking of geometry and layout, the original design of the historic turf and lawn was very symmetrical.
Yes.
And the plans that I see don't look very symmetrical, especially as it's in the front of the building. And I was wondering if that's something to consider as far as maintaining the historic integrity of the original design for that
Yes.
landscape.
Yes. Wow, the geometry of this town is amazing. It was laid out as an equilateral triangle, and if you look at that, what that means is you've got a 60-degree, at each apex of that triangle. And yes, that geometry does extend up into that site, and that's one of the reasons why the concrete is so important, why the building location is so important, and there is a lot of symmetry, but there's also a lot of asymmetry in that site. If you looked at it from an aerial, you would see that the Nevada Way side has certain geometric characteristics to it, where the Utah-Arizona side is a little bit different. So, but that's kind of a question I might have to defer to our architect and designers to speak more about the symmetry of that.
Okay, I mean, or my comment is in order to move this through the SHPO, and if they're considering, if you are considering maintaining the historic integrity of the site, which is the lawn area, which was symmetrical, and you're replacing the turf that was symmetrically located, at least at the front of the building.
Yes.
And the view from the park, Wilbur Park on up. That's important to maintain that view shed. And that view shed is very flat and symmetrical. And so I guess my comment or my suggestion is to utilize a symmetry of your plantings or in hardscaping, and then not blocking the view of the building with big trees, lots of shade trees, at least in that section where you're seeing and
Yes.
using the stairway to see that building, because it is a prominent feature and shouldn't be, in my opinion, blocked.
Agreed, and that is our intent. So if you're standing at Park Street, we will not be planting any trees along Park Street that would grow and block that view, nor will we be planting any trees up at the top of the site next to the building that would also obstruct that view. And the slope in the front is a 4-to-1 slope. Over the years, it's kind of sloughed a little bit. So there is a possibility that we'll go in and refresh that slope a bit and bring it back to a nice crisp 4-to-1 slope. We'd like to improve some of the drainage at the toe of that slope so that it doesn't drain across the sidewalk. But noted that the plantings and providing that symmetry is something that we want to incorporate into the design.
The design looks very informal, at least your 30%
Yeah.
design.
Yeah.
And so I think it just needs to be a little more formal in that section that's directly in front of the building facade.
Gotcha.
Again, though, that's just based on what I think was intended by the designer at the time.
Yeah.
And what grew up there over the years, so.
Yeah, it's a fascinating site.
And then, let's see, oh, you already asked about the landscape, or the lighting, okay. That's all I had, and also I do support using Mojave landscape materials and vegetation. Oh, and if you could look to the triangular traffic islands, there's 3 of them.
Yeah. That Wilbur Reed planted as demonstration gardens
Right.
to kind of show
Right.
that native desert vegetation. Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
and so I think if you utilize those types of plants and design, it's kind of
Yeah.
lack of a design though now, but to
Gotcha.
keep those in mind in the design concept.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, that's all I had.
Chad, I have one more question.
Sure.
It just occurred to me, if there are going to be interpretive signs dealing with the history of Boulder City, is the Historic Preservation Commission going to have a chance to comment or?
Oh, we would
on-
certainly,
on those?
we would certainly welcome
Okay.
your
I
continued
don't know how that
input on
happened,
this.
but whatever, it'd be nice if we would. Yeah.
But that raises a good question. Yeah, we would like to continue to engage with this commission, and if there's any way that you propose that we can engage in these discussions and keep you apprised of this, and so that your voice is also incorporated into this project, we would welcome that. And all righty.
Again, thank you very much.
All righty, thank you.
All right, on to agenda item 3 for possible action, discussion with Northwind Resource Consulting on potential changes to the adopted exterior design guidelines for various properties in the historic district.
Good evening.
Wow.
So, okay, so am I able to, oh, good, okay, good. So I
Could
don't have to
you-
say next slide, all right.
Could you also state your name? I didn't state it here.
Sure, of course.
Sorry.
Courtney Mooney with Northwind Resource Consulting. Okay, so first I'd like to thank the committee for all of their comments. Really, you all did such an incredible deep dive on these and helped us tremendously with a lot of, just even some of the little stuff that we missed, and caught some things that were inconsistencies in. For example, committee member Hounce mentioned the inconsistencies between the property table and some of the design guidelines. And so I want you to know that we have to date fixed all of those. And hopefully we won't find any more. So I really appreciate that. There were some typos and other things. Regarding the image quality, Committee Member Turner, we're still working on that. So on the final guideline, the final packet will have the perfect, gorgeous images with high res. So again, the comments really triggered a thorough review of the property table, the Excel spreadsheet that we had submitted with the 2020 Historic District Update. And we spent hours working on that, trying to make sure that everything was fixed. And then Chair Davenport submitted some more comments on those. So again, thank you so much for your help. I met with Director Mays, Susan, and Chair Davenport to discuss Ms. Davenport's substantive comments regarding the design guidelines. And these in general recommended, more specificity to the guidelines. So there were a couple of areas where we had said, typically there would be 2 windows or something. And so they wanted, they suggested that typically be removed, and that makes sense. As long as we know exactly what was there, then I think that makes sense to remove typically or generally or whatever. And that kind of comes to another comment where just more specificity in general regarding, the materials that were being recommended. So instead of a 1/1 wood or 1/1 sash window, it would say, a wood frame 1/1 sash window. And I believe we've corrected a lot of those already as well. Some other comments, some recommendations were to add additional information pertinent to certain styles, address streetscape elements, add a section for, appropriate versus not appropriate with graphics for additions, and, break certain styles up by builder. Again, a couple of you mentioned that in the last meeting, and I think that's completely doable. We've started making a lot of those changes already, and we're continuing to work with city staff and the committee on how best to address some of the remaining questions. And hopefully we'll have some of those substantive changes for you to be able to view at the January meeting of the January committee meeting. So we've made a lot of progress. We've made some progress since the material that you have in your packet as well.
Ray, do you have any comments?
I'm just like to say thank you very much for being so responsive and taking care of fixing all of that stuff, and everything looks great to me.
Thanks.
Oh, I got the button push, yeah, okay. Under the craftsman style, contributing the page with the characteristic defining features, you have a sentence in there that says, most of the homes labeled as craftsman during the most recent historic resource survey were done so based on later alterations to give a craftsman style appearance. Only one property, at 600 Avenue C, is but I'm curious what most of the homes labeled, are those homes that are probably non-contributing?
Yes.
Okay, so they're in, sometime in the future when we get we won't, well, it's another question. We don't deal with non-contributing homes, but apparently there will be guidelines for non-contributing. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, that's what I had. Yeah, there was one little tiny thing, but I can't find it again, so you get away scot-free on that. Well, you used the term et cetera at the end of the sentence.
Oh, no,
And I thought, no, wait a minute, you can't say et cetera. But,
All right, I'll remove that.
but I can't find it now, so I don't know.
I'll find it.
Maybe I made it up, I don't know.
I'll burn the midnight oil finding that.
Anyway, I do have some questions that came up on this minimal traditional style, okay? On Avenue D, and this is really a question, okay? On Avenue D, there's 3 houses listed contributing, 620, 632, and 667. on your ARA sheets, they're listed as in order having been built 1945, 1945, 1937. Those same three houses on Janus were reported as being circa 1942 to 1949. The question I have is, and we've kind of mentioned this before, is where do those dates come from? Because obviously Janus they didn't know exactly, so they threw out but the point is, if they're post-1945, then they aren't, and these are all contributing, but if they're built post-1945, then they're not contributing, okay? So that date does mean something. So anyway, I'm curious, if you could somehow just let me know what the answer to that question is. Where do those dates come from?
Sure, I can't speak for Janus, but we use the assessor data
All right.
for our dates. So, and I'll double check and look at those and make sure that those are the accurate dates.
Because I don't see, that's the other thing I don't understand. The assessor date, 1945, the county didn't have anything to do with assessing house values in Boulder City, I don't believe, did they? I mean, it didn't become a city, it didn't become independent from the Bureau till 1960. So I don't know where the county assessor is getting these dates from, is my, and I'm sorry, and it may be beyond your purview, but I don't know how to find these out, and to me, it's an important question. And there is one other one that is 659 Avenue B. The Northwind report has it constructed in 1945, but Janus has it constructed post-1949. Now, if Janus is correct, then that house is not historic.
Can
And
you,
I think that's on Avenue B, it's 659 Avenue B.
659, okay.
So again, it's kind of a question, really. But if it was built in 49, I'm sorry, it's not. So, and some of these, I think maybe you've already answered my question. One located on not contribute. Oh. One located on, I don't know what I had there. 639 shown as contributing. 639 Avenue C. 639 Avenue C is shown as contributing. Page 2, West 4. What I was doing was looking at the your photo, the air photo with the numbers on it that plots the contributing and non-contributing houses. Okay, you got yellow and green and blue. There was a discrepancy, I think, with 639 Avenue, no, not 63.
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about the map yet, because has not been changed yet.
So I'm going to leave that alone.
Okay.
Because it was something I was curious about, but maybe you've already taken care of that. It was, so I'll let that one go there. 15 million ranch style.
We're holding off on that a little bit until we kind of work through the design guidelines, because as we're working through these and, taking a deeper look at some of these properties, we're finding, again, some typos or just, discrepancies. So the maps will be
Okay,
updated
good,
along with the
yeah.
property table and everything, and we'll get that to you
Yeah.
guys.
And no, because those maps are really important.
Yeah.
Because I tell people, if you want to know what what your house is, go look at that map, I mean, it's online. So it really is an important, and it's great, by the way. I use it all the time, so. All right, well, anyway, thank you, Courtney. And yeah, it seems we're making progress, so thank you.
You're welcome.
No, I think you're doing a fine job. It's come together. It's looking good.
Can you confirm that the comments that you addressed, both from September 28th and then my comments that I made in November, and you show that, you note that this was fixed and this was changed and whatever, but that's not necessarily reflected in these images?
Correct,
Because
yeah.
you're still working on
Right.
these. Okay, because, for instance, parkways,
Yep,
there's an example here in front of the hotel that points to continuous parkways. And there just needs to be consistency regarding how, specifically, what are these guidelines addressing? And I think we've determined that it's just the structures, not landscape, not streetscapes, not homes or within a particular neighborhood and how they interact with each other. It's very individual. So we'll get to that, I guess, when we see the next version in January, correct? Okay, and then there was another one where it talks about a walkway that leads to the sidewalk. Can't remember which. Oh, it's the minimal traditional style, 904, 906 Wyoming Street. Your image points to a walkway to sidewalk.
Yeah.
Are we addressing sidewalks and walkways as well as then fences, walls, that whole category of
right.
features that are part of a property, but we're not addressing at this point. And I believe we're going to address it separately in different guidance. And maybe Michael can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, since these design guidelines are specific to the architecture of the structures, and there's interest by the commission to be exploring and providing guidance on other features which are not tied to the certificate of appropriateness, because you don't require, city doesn't require building permits and do not regulate those. So there would be an opportunity to put together guidelines, advisory guidelines, that can be shared with residents to give them guidance on those types of elements, sidewalks, landscaping features that would be historical.
Any other comments? Thank you again, Courtney.
You're welcome. Thank you,
Looking
guys.
awesome. Can't
Appreciate
wait till
it.
these are done. I'm sure
You and me
feel
both.
the same way. All right, what's the next item? So, on to the next item. For possible action, recommendation on proposed changes at 651 Avenue B relative the, no, am I in the wrong place? Oh, I am so sorry. Agenda item number 4, for possible action, discussion regarding the process for nominating individual properties to the National Register of Historic Places. And Courtney again, thank you.
It's the Northwind Show. I believe there is a PowerPoint. Oh, here we go. Great. Okay. Northwind was asked to provide some information on how to list individual properties in the National Register of Historic Places, which is the nation's official list of places worthy of preservation. The Boulder City Historic District is listed as a district in the National Register, and some properties within the district are determined eligible for listing individually. Before diving into the National Register nomination process, I thought that it would be helpful to review the results of the 2020 update to the Boulder City Historic District. The update identified 66 properties determined individually eligible for listing in the National Register, and the majority of these are residential, with 7 public or institutional properties and 3 commercial properties. Most are the Spanish Ranch style, followed by Spanish Revival, the Ranch style, minimal traditional, national folk, colonial revival, mission, and Monterey styles. Prior to embarking on the National Register nomination process, it's important that the property owner confirm the property's listing status by reviewing the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO, Architectural Resource Assessment, or ARA, form completed for every property in the district as part of the 2020 update. All of the ARA forms are posted on the city's historic preservation website, and the form provides property information such as construction year, current owner, exterior building materials, etc., a photograph from the 1983 survey, current photos, recommendations for contributing and or individually eligible for listing in the National Register or non-contributing status. If individually eligible, the ARA form will provide the National Register criteria or criterion under which the property is found eligible. In this example, the property is determined eligible under criterion C because it retains its original character-defining architectural features. If a property is determined to be individually eligible, a nomination application on a National Register registration form can be submitted for an individual nomination. Sorry, I know this gets confusing. Before preparing and submitting a nomination, it is important that the property owner visits the Nevada SHPO website to read their document, Preparing Nominations to the National Register of Historic Places. This document provides an introduction to the National Register's purpose. It spells out the nomination process and the effects of listing, and it provides helpful information for establishing significance in the state of Nevada, and it also has helpful references and links. There's a 3-step nomination process in Nevada. Coordinate with SHPO staff to submit the nomination. I can't stress enough how important this step is. It bears repeating. Coordinate with SHPO staff to submit the nomination. They're extremely helpful and knowledgeable, and they will work with the applicant to determine if the property is eligible, to ensure that the documentation is complete, because it does get pretty complex, and that the nomination package meets the requirements of the program. Once that SHPO has determined that the nomination form is complete, it is forwarded for review at the next regular meeting of the Nevada Board of Museums and History, and that's the State Review Board for National Register nominations in the state, among other things. If a majority of board members approve the nomination, a final version is prepared. It's signed by the State Historic Preservation Officer and forwarded to the keeper of the National Register in Washington, D.C. for final review. The keeper will either list the property, return the nomination for more information, or reject the nomination as ineligible. It's important to note that anyone can nominate any property to the National Register. The person nominating the property does not need to be the property owner. However, owner support really is critical to the nomination process. The SHPO website also has links to the National Register website on how to list a property. This is where the nomination form is housed. And the National Register also recommends coordinating with the SHPO office prior to submitting a nomination. On the National Register website, there is a link to the National Register Bulletin, How to Complete the National Register Registration Form, that provides detailed instructions on completing the form. The nomination form is very structured. It has very specific requirements for completion. The first sections, 1 through 6, require some basic information, such as the name of the property, like does it have a historic name, the so-and-so house, whatever, if applicable. Address, ownership, category. So, for example, is it a building? Is it a district, a structure, and the number of buildings or structures on a property, and the current use. Section 7 requires a detailed current description of the property, including historic and current physical appearance and condition of the property, its location, type, architectural style, method of construction, materials, size, significant architectural features, and the overall setting for the resource. This is where you would indicate whether the property has historic integrity. In other words, does it retain its historic and significant character-defining features? The 2020 R forms also include a statement of integrity for each of the individually eligible properties. So those are very helpful. The form also asks for architectural classification. So for most Boulder City Historic District properties, this would be late 19th and early 20th century revivals or American movements. And that's all in the National Register Bulletin. Again, the applicant will find historic maps, photos, architectural plans, and building records, and an understanding of basic architectural and structural terms helpful here. A good construction dictionary is very helpful, as again are the 2020 ARA forms. Section 8 is the statement of significance. This is where the applicant makes the case for historic significance and under which criteria or criterion it is significant, as shown in the center image, which is basically discusses the basic criteria. So this is an oversimplification, but if it is eligible under criteria A or criterion A, then it's associated with events that have made a significant contribution to the broad patterns of our history. If it's criterion B, it's associated with a significant person. Criterion C is significant for its association with a type of building or architect, et cetera, architectural style, et cetera. So you need to choose one of those, or two, and again, or three, or four. This is listed on the ARA forms for the buildings that have been determined individually eligible. Applicants will also need to know the area of significance. For example, is it significant in the area of planning and design, which is possible for Boulder City, commerce, architecture? There are a number to choose from. You will need to know the period of significance, so the window of years in which the building is able to convey its significance, and any significant associations with those areas, such as architects, builders. Again, much of this information will be in the 1983 and or 2020 survey reports. A summary paragraph and detailed narrative with historic context that justifies the significance is required. Historic newspapers, ownership records, deeds, assessor records will be helpful here, in addition to the research needed for the previous section. The applicant is looking for anything that can provide evidence to support the significance argument being made. Remaining sections include the bibliography, latitude and longitude or UTM coordinates of the property, and current photographs. Usually latitude and longitude is sufficient, and you can just find that by clicking on the property in Google Maps. It can be complicated, so it's important to use the tools provided by the SHPO and the National Register websites. The entire process can take several weeks to just prepare the nomination, to even months, depending on how much time a person has and experience the applicant has, and how complicated the property is. The larger the property, the more complicated architecturally it is, or the more complicated historically it is, it can take a little bit longer. If a consultant is hired, it can cost, and this is just a kind of a real estimate, anywhere from $6,000 to $12,000, depending on the consultant and, again, the complexity of the property. And that's the process. I know it sounds complicated. I got into the weeds, but I think it's important to know that that there are a lot of helpful tools out there for applicants to look at that really spell out each thing along the way. I think the most daunting thing might be the research and kind of, acquainting yourself with architectural and structural terms if you don't know those. Do you have any comments?
Information overload almost. No, I thank you for all that info. Just, it's just kind of, I think, it's kind of my fault, 'cause I think at our last meeting, I was talking about, looking at ways of maybe getting some of our city buildings, like this building here on on his, my tongue's not working, National Historic Register. Kind of a little bit of lead by example, we show this, and then as the people in the community, if they've got an historic home, maybe they might want to get it registered, and if it's been done here at City Hall or, some of the city buildings, somebody would be aware of the process and might be able to help the homeowner, guide them through the process. Like you say, it's not real difficult, but it is complicated, and there's a lot of info to be dug up, and ordinary average person, like say myself, if I was trying to do my house, I'd be kind of, okay, now what do I do? But I'm not there yet. My house isn't old enough yet. But for somebody else in the historic district, they might want to do that. They're really proud of their home, and it'd be nice if we maybe here's somebody in the city. We've gone through it with a couple of our buildings, and somebody's familiar with it and help guide them along. I mean, $6,000 to $12,000 for a consultant is just kind of a lot of money for somebody just to get a little plaque on their house.
Yep.
But thank you for the
Sure.
for the information and presentation. Do appreciate it. Thank you.
Fortunately for Boulder City, there is so much historic information available. So it's just about getting the right, accessing it or knowing where to go. But there is so much of it available that it's really nice. Some people don't have any information at all about their homes. So Boulder City, the historic homes in the historic district are lucky that way.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good records.
Of course I have some, but actually, yeah, Courtney, thank you for that. And I do have some questions, and it might be more Michael than you, I'm not sure, but we have a CLG manual that nobody ever seems to read, but there's a section in there called CLG Participation in the National Register Process. And it outlines some of the things that are required of the CLG relative to nominating historic properties. And just a couple of them, one of them is the HPC, and I assume that's us, and the chief elected official agree that the proposed nomination meets the criteria. And the SHPO will forward, so they have to agree. In other words, the mayor and the Historic Preservation Commission have to agree. The Historic Preservation Commission and the chief elected official agree that proposed nomination does not meet. So if you say no, So my point is, though, that there are, in addition to the national nominating process that you outlined, which is, like you said, very there's also an additional sort of
Step.
approval process that has to go through this in accordance with the CLG. And I think that needs to be noted if we're going to ever participate or, do these things. I mean, it's not onerous, I don't think. It just has to be done. It's basically the mayor and that says HPC. I assume that's the commission. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are. So.
I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't know if SHPO requires the approval of the local board so much as they want to make sure that the local board has reviewed it and that they provide comments before it goes to SHPO.
I suspect that that's actually the intent.
Okay.
Yeah, but it is something that needs to be done because this is coming from SHPO. It's the CLG manual.
Right.
I mean, that's so but yeah, I think it's more an informational thing than it is although apparently they can disagree. I mean, if they do disagree, SHPO won't send it on down the line. So, I mean, they being mayor and the HPC. Anyway, that was my only comment. But thanks for the,
You're welcome.
Well, I was going to propose that the committee start nominating some of these 66 properties that are individually eligible, but if it's going to cost $6,000 to $12,000, I don't know. That, would that be the case, considering, like you said, Boulder City, we have the recent survey and we've got a lot of information at our disposal, readily at our disposal. So with that 6 to 12K, let's say the committee wanted to nominate a couple of properties. The committee itself discuss and select a couple of properties for nomination to the register. Would we still be looking at those kind of numbers? Would that be, your fee? I mean, no pressure right now, but.
Well,
You know.
I think that's more for a contractor who might be coming in cold, or they may not have the more time they spend, obviously, the more the fee would reflect that amount of time.
Yeah.
So we didn't actually work up a budget for this. We just my team and I just kind of thought about what we've charged in the past and what we know other companies to charge to kind of give you a range. But could be less.
Not
I don't know.
considerably less?
It's hard, it's impossible to say, so I'm really sorry.
Because that
I'd
is
love to-
something I think the committee
Yeah.
should do. I mean, I never heard anything about costs before, what we might be looking at, but like I said, I was ready to propose, we have discussion about coming up with a project for the committee to nominate one. Well, I was thinking 4, but, if the committee was to nominate a couple of properties per year going forward, I mean, it would set a good example, like Glenn was saying, it would set a good example and encourage other people to maybe think about doing it too and create a bit of buzz, and might be something we could incorporate into Historic Preservation Day at some point, I mean, obviously not next year, but I was hoping we might consider a project such as that the committee nominates, starts the process, get a few of these places nominated and get some discussion going about that, and maybe the public too will want to get involved and get their house nominated, get
Yeah.
some buzz going. So I'd be curious to know, like if it was 2, let's say it was 2, if we could maybe come up with an approximate price maybe that we might have some discussion at a future date, about whether or not to take on a project like that.
If I can jump in, Ray, my thought process, going right along with what you're doing, my thought process is when I first brought it up last month was I was thinking is using, City Hall as a test bed for historic, just one site, start right here, this building is being used. A lot of people come and go to it for whatever reason. I thought, I just wanted to kind of get the conversation started about maybe getting this building on historic register,
Register.
listed. My tongue's not working tonight. And that's kind of, so that plays right along with what you're thinking. But my thought was, let's start with one. Find out, and this would be a prime example of leading by example. It's City Hall. It's a historic building. Everybody knows where City Hall is. A lot of people come see it. People visit. It's right close to downtown. So that was kind of where my thought waves were going prior to this. So
Yeah,
continue on
exactly.
with your.
Yeah. Well, City Hall is a great place to start. But it's a big building though, Courtney.
I'm not sure it's
I think-
individually eligible.
Oh, right. Of course. Of course.
Yeah.
But anyway, just for future discussion, maybe would it be possible for us to find out just an approximate idea what a couple of, if you had to work on a couple of houses, let's say here in Boulder City.
Single-family houses?
Yeah, I mean, we've 66 properties, so we got plenty to choose from. And then maybe we can have some more discussion about whether or not to take on a project like that.
Madam Chair?
I have a bunch of questions. I guess before we as a committee embark on assisting either property owners or on our own, taking on the task of nominating properties to the National Register, I guess it'd be helpful to tell the public what are the pros and cons for nominating a property to the National Register, what are the benefits for doing that. And I don't know if you can answer that now, but I guess it depends on the property. You know, so if a property owner does add their property to the National Register, what does it get them? You know, if they spend all that time and money, what's the benefit? And it'd be great to kind of, you know, describe that or make that available to them.
So, and there aren't a lot of benefits for individual properties, single-family homes, to be listed on the National Register. It is honorary, just like the district is. So there is not an additional layer of protection from, say, encroachment or anything, just like with the district itself, because it's National Register. Unless the property is an income-producing property. And I know there's been some changes in the last year with the tax law and these things. I'm not really that up on it, so this is more of, I'd have to do a little bit of research, but income-producing properties, and that includes, I believe, rental properties as well, can apply for a tax credit for qualified rehabilitation on the property. So there's a lot of tax credit properties in Nevada that are good examples. They do get kind of complicated. Usually it involves an attorney, a tax attorney, and those types of things to kind of work the details out. But that's where the real benefit of a National Register listing status comes in. It is beneficial for, there's some layer of protection against federally funded projects. So for example, if NDOT wanted to come in and widen Nevada Way, and you know they were getting federal highway funds to do that, they would have to take into account the fact that they're going right through a district. So, or the turf removal program with reclamation, they have to take into account the impacts of that project because they're in a historic district and it's a historic building and, you know, all of those things. So there is some like additional layers of review that are kicked in with federally funded or any projects that have a federal nexus because it's a listed National Register district. And again, the single-family home. Also, if it's let's say there was a couple single-family homes on Nevada Way that were listed and the district was not a district, the federal agency would still have to take into account their impact on those listed properties. And you don't even have to be listed, you could be determined eligible. They still have to take that into account. So it's not an immediate huge benefit. Of course, we've all talked about the benefits of historic district designation and how, you know, that typically inspires, you know, more pride in the community and those other benefits. But with individual listing, it can happen, but it's not a immediate monetary benefit, or you don't get a free plaque from the National Register. So, you know, it's kind of sometimes it's a hard sell, but it does, I think, in the long term, strengthen the community.
Do you know if individual nominated or listed properties improve the historic district nomination or at all? Is that,
I would
is there a
assume,
correlation?
yeah, I mean, I would assume, I don't have any statistics or anything. Like I said, I didn't prepare for these questions, but I would think that it would have the same impact on individual properties that it would on a district. So if you're going to go through all of that to get your property listed, you're going to, you know, take more, put more thought into the preservation of those character-defining features and making sure that, you know, that the building stays preserved and keeps up the character of the, you know, contributes to the character of the district.
And my final question, is there again, pros and cons or benefits in comparing nominating a property to the National Register versus the local register or the state register?
State and national are the same. Local register, obviously, you know, that kicks in the ordinance for the design guidelines. So you would have National Register nomination, like let's say you know this because before all of, you know, before the ordinance was approved and the local guidelines, you know, that we're working through right now, before all of that, it was advisory because it's just a National Register district and the National Register doesn't impose any guidelines or restrictions on property owners. So it's, you know, so if you are in a locally designated district, now you have, you know, guidelines that are mandatory. So it's a little bit different. However, you know, that's been shown to improve, you know, the character of the historic district as well. So.
And then, I'm sorry, I did have a final question. What's the legality or the appropriateness that the city assists a homeowner in nominating their property to the National Register? Can the committee directly assist a property owner, or can the city do that? And whether that's just consultation, or I'm sure you wouldn't be funding any of that, but.
Yeah, it all goes back to resources and money. You know, as you know, we have a contract with Northwind, up to $75,000 a year to help support historic preservation efforts within the community. And of course, our focus is following the action items contained in the historic preservation plan. So that's where the priority and efforts are. Anytime you deviate from that, then it's taking away from those efforts and completing the historic preservation plan goals.
Thank you. Thank you
I thought
again,
this one was going to be
Courtney.
easy.
Courtney, you aren't leaving, are you?
No, I think I have a couple more items.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you. All right, moving on to Agenda 5, right? For possible action, recommendation on proposed changes at 651 Avenue B relative to the adopted exterior design guidelines for that area.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the staff report notes, the permit application for this remodel came in under the prior Historic Resources Code, which, as you know, under that code, compliance with any adopted guidelines is voluntary by the homeowner. And per the provisions of that code, the most we could ever do would be to delay the permit request so that it could come before the Historic Committee for review and recommendation to the property owner if what they were proposing did not comply with the adopted guidelines. In this case, this is an avenue home, so the guidelines the committee had previously adopted for avenue homes were rather minimal because it reflected the fact that most of the homes had already been modified to a great degree over the years. And under those guidelines for the avenue homes, the only things that actually triggered review by the committee would be adding a second story or changing the roof line. In this case, they're not adding a second story, but the addition will trigger a change to the roof line. It could be argued that the new roof line would still technically be double pitched because the roof pitch of the home is at a different pitch than that of the porch, which is pretty typical for what the Janus report referred to as double pitched roofs, but it certainly will not be the same pitch that is on the existing house. And therefore that triggered review by the committee. We also had our consultant, Ms. Mooney, review the request, and based on those changes, her comments are that making those changes would change the property from contributing to non-contributing for the district. The homeowner was invited to attend. I'm not sure if Mr. Washburn is here. Apparently, he decided not to attend. We had strongly encouraged that he reach out to our consultant to discuss if there were possible changes he could make that would lessen the impact and hopefully keep the property contributing. And he initially indicated he was willing to discuss that with her. She reached out. He did not respond.
I don't know where to start. Obviously, if it's gonna be taken, we're historic preservation, we're trying to encourage people to, if they have a contributed home, to keep it contributing, and this change here, it takes it from contributing to not contributing. Just on that basis, I'd have to, I don't know what kind of suggestions we could make to the homeowner to go ahead with their plan somehow, but also see if they can maintain being a contributing building, to the historic district. We all understand people want to make changes to their homes and, that accommodate their needs and such, but I don't know what else to say. It looks nice. It'll be a nice addition to their home. It'll, all that good stuff. But it's just the biggest thing is we're historic preservation. It takes the non-compliant. We're losing them, faster than that we keep up with. It just. I don't know what else to say. Right at this moment, I might have more to think about after some other comments from my fellow members here. So.
Well, yeah. I think we ought to make this a poster child for what happens if you don't have mandatory guidelines. Because this is obviously taking one of actually this house, to me, looking at it, comes closer to being original than probably any other house in the avenues except for 640 Avenue C. These people obviously have no interest in preserving it or maintaining any character of the historic district, which, by the way, and I don't, they're perfectly within their right to do what they're doing, and they're going to have a beautiful home when they're done. But we will be missing one more historic house in the district, and I don't know how many more we're going to lose before we don't have a historic district. I'm not too sure we haven't already got there, but I'd like to make a big sign, put it out front and say, see what happens if you don't have mandatory guidelines, but I got a hunch I won't do that, probably. So anyway, no, I don't have any comments, really. These folks can do what they want to do because we had 40 years of this city not giving a damn about historic preservation, and that's where we are. So hopefully we won't have another one. That's all.
I would just encourage the applicant, if they're watching, to please reconsider and reach out to Courtney Mooney, and maybe we can come up with some changes that won't take away any of the historic features. It is very unfortunate that this is not covered by the ordinance now, but at least now we do have those protections going forward. And I would again encourage the applicant, Timothy and Joelle Washburn, to reconsider their plans. Thank you.
I don't have anything more to add to what everybody has said. It's just a shame that we're going to lose another building if the folks, the property owners, don't reach out and talk to not just only Courtney, but, we on the committee can also assist in some solutions perhaps. That's all.
What I will do is forward basically the recommendation that the owner reconsider his proposal. That's at least one, it's a recommendation rather than no recommendation.
Thank you. Agenda item number 6. For possible action, recommendation to the City Council on applications for residential historic preservation grants for, first property is 504 Ash Street, and then the second property is 1300 Colorado Street.
As the commission is very much aware of the historic residential grant guidelines that you developed, which were reviewed by the City Council and adopted by the City Council. Subsequently, the City Council, as part of the fiscal year 23 budget, approved $100,000 to be utilized for these grant applications. The intent of the grants are to ensure that protect and or change properties that are non-contributing to a contributing status. So if they are currently contributing, they would remain contributing through the use of these grant funds and help preserve the properties. Or if they're non-contributing, but as a result of the improvements, they would become contributing properties to the district, then they would be eligible. Both the applications are contained in your packet, and as you evaluate the applications, I wanted to share some additional information. And note that on page 142 of your packet are the questions to consider as you make your recommendation on the grants. These were developed by the commission and evaluate the grant application project and compliance with the guidelines. With the first application for 504 Ash Street, they're proposing to replace 18 windows in their home. You have the existing design guidelines provisions within the staff report. You also have Ms. Mooney's evaluation of that application and additional materials supplied by the applicant. With the second application, and this is for 1300 Colorado Street, similarly, you have the application and a summary of the design guidelines and review by Ms. Mooney. With 1300 Colorado Street, though, the applicant has already moved forward with replacing the windows. This would make them ineligible for the grant because that's one of the requirements, is that you have to wait until the commission reviews, City Council approves the grant, and the grant is signed before work can begin. And so with that material, I can answer any questions. Ms. Mooney can answer questions on her interpretations. And you also have within your packet the design guidelines for your review. And what we'd be looking for is a motion on each of the two grant applications.
Why are we looking at the two grant or the second one?
Well, they're ineligible, but I think we didn't find out about the work beginning until after it was put in the packet. So it's in the packet, and so I think it's appropriate to just take a vote on it, even though it's been disqualified.
I just wanted to, can we already start talking about 504 Ash Street, or
Yeah. Well, 504
do we need to do?
is one on the
I
list.
would just go ahead with 504 and then 1300.
It's A.
So I see Bob is here. I'm looking at the bids for the windows, Bob. This last one is for 73, no, 97,000?
Beg pardon?
The bid, 97,000?
Oh, that was from Anderson.
And is
That's not
that,
the one I'm going to do.
are they, but is that, it doesn't, I don't see any, what material it is on the bid, though. What, was that for wood windows?
No, it's just their
Yeah.
proprietary,
Wow.
thing. Yeah, I was looking at probably Pella, is probably a pretty good one, and they're more affordable.
Yeah. And these are the original windows you're replacing, though, right?
Yeah, the original are the wood, just regular glass. And I look around the neighborhood, and there's a lot of other houses that have been replacing the windows because of the problem that the windows have. It's just dirt comes through them, and then the UV destroys the interior of the house. And I took some pictures. There's a couple
Yeah.
there. I can't tell the difference really from the street. If somebody driving by, look, it looks the same. They're the same basic window, except using current materials and UV-resistant glass, and they're insulated. And so that's why we wanted to do it. There's a lot of damage in the house, as you can see with the pictures.
No, I just really wanted to know if had you gotten any bids for actual wooden windows at all? I'd really like to know what,
Oh, well, the wooden
we'd be looking
windows-
at.
Yeah, they would be, the wooden, they look the same. You got wood, you got fiberglass, and you got vinyl. And from the outside, looking at them, they're all gonna look the same. It's the same designs, and it's just more of not an appearance-wise, it's in different types of climates. Wood is a little bit better than the fiberglass and then the vinyl. In this part of the country, people usually do the vinyl or the fiberglass.
The only trouble being, which I'm sure you're already aware, is that it doesn't meet the Secretary of the Interior standards.
Yeah,
So that's one of the requirements
if they'd have to be wood
for the grant, that it meet the standards.
for windows, they'd
Res-
have to be wood windows?
Well, if you're replacing the original, yes. Repair before replace, basically,
Yeah,
is the requirement there.
Okay.
So that would, it seems to me that automatically excludes you from the project, from the grant, as far as I can tell.
I wasn't aware of that. I don't,
I think it'd be helpful to have Ms. Mooney kind of talk about her evaluation of
Yeah.
this, the Secretary of Interior standards, and then I can talk about the intent of the grant program.
because
All
on
right,
wood
very good.
windows, you can't get wood windows that'd be exactly the same. They didn't make those since 1938. Those are kind of custom-made windows. I think they were probably made on site,
Yeah,
when they built it. So there's really no way to replace the windows.
Well, a lot of times on older windows, there's, ways of repairing them. There's places, that you can buy new sash cords, you can buy the old bronze strippings, you can get, counterweights and stuff like that, and they can basically be reconstructed to be almost as efficient as a new window, but yet still retain 100% of your historic accuracy. It just take a little bit of research and a little effort. But yeah, I'm just throwing it out there that there are some ways of restoring the original window, and that's where I think
Madam
where
Chair,
the money from this grant would come into play.
Mhm.
That would help to offset those costs, because it is going to be a little, it'll cost a few bucks and stuff like that to do it. But that's the whole idea of the grant money is to help somebody to do it that way, you know, to maintain the historic look and feel of the home.
Yeah. Well, the new windows look the same as the old windows. They don't really, you can see from the photos, have you, take a look at the photo? From there's two houses, one has the original window and one has replacement windows. And so from the street, you can't tell the difference. So as far as aesthetically, you can't tell. If you wanted to rebuild these windows, you'd still have single pane glass. You'd have no UV protection, so that's not going to solve anything. They're not sealed, you know, they're just in little channels. Dirt still comes in, and so they're really obsolete windows that, you know, the only other thing you could do is you can put screens on them, but then you can't see the windows. And so I guess that's what we'd have to do, is just put screens, and that would at least do the UV, so we wouldn't damage the interior of the house, but then you couldn't see the windows. But I guess that's an option.
Did you want to have Courtney?
Courtney, and let me
Russell?
just kick off, because with respect to the residential grants, probably a majority of the applicants we've been talking to and homeowners are interested in window replacement. Challenges that they have found, and Courtney can talk about her efforts to try to respond to this. As the Secretary of Interior standards state, they should be restored as opposed to being replaced. The challenge is finding contractors that can do that work. You may recall a couple meetings ago, I had talked about one of the things that I want to do with future CLG grant funding is to bring in a contractor from outside of Las Vegas, knowledgeable with respect to this work, to help train local contractors to be able to do the work that no one is able to do in the valley. So that's the number one challenge. The second challenge, as we're talking to homeowners with respect to windows and window replacement, is the contractors that do window replacement are not recommending wood, because we live in a desert climate and the ability for the wood to survive today. And so those are two of the challenges. And so ultimately, when you look at this application, if the intent of the grant is to help preserve a contributing property, stay contributing, and through that effort, they're able to replace the windows with the exact same design and style, then it remains a contributing property. But for the grant, then a property owner can go and put in any windows they want to. And as you know, that's one of the factors that's evaluated on whether a property remains contributing or not. And if the windows are replaced and they're not the same style and design, then that can take it from a contributing property to a non-contributing property. And so in this application, you're correct, it is not wood. The Secretary of Interior standards say you should preserve the existing windows, but the windows aren't operable. And so with this alternative, it would still remain a contributing property. And I don't know if, Courtney, you wanted to add anything more to that?
Unless there are any questions about the standards specifically, I think you characterized the challenges. Oh, sorry, Courtney Mooney for the record. I think Director Mays characterized the challenges really, really succinctly. So unless there are any questions specifically about the standards, for me.
I don't know if it's for you or just a discussion, but I completely understand his frustration, or homeowners' frustration, and complete replacement or with the restoration of wood windows. It's really difficult. But my interpretation of the Secretary of Interior standards, number 6, states deteriorated historic features will be repaired rather than replaced. Got it. The next part, though, says where the severity of deterioration requires replacement of distinctive features, the new feature will match the old in design, color, texture, and where possible, materials. In my opinion, that allows, it allows for flexibility when there are these challenges of either finding somebody to repair or replace those windows, or you just can't find the materials anymore. Given that that's available as a tool for us to assist homeowners, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can just go to Home Depot and get any old window. I think there's a need to, if they're going to replace a historic feature, in this case a window, with a modern window, then we need more specific information about what that replacement looks like, what materials that it's made of. Is it in fact matching the function of the window? Is it a sash window or a casement window? Are they going to maintain that? Is the exterior measurements of either the frame, the sash, or the muntins, are they exactly the same or pretty darn close to being the same as the original, as well as the quantity of lights within that window? If we could see that they made that effort, or that those efforts are being made, that I am trying my best to find an exact copy of that window, and here's what I found, and it's 99.9% a direct replica of that window, I mean, I think we could approve something like that. But that's my interpretation of that section of the Secretary of Interior standards.
I've highlighted that same thing because it does say where possible. There's another little, in the, if we look at the guidelines, the city of Bowden residential, there's a section on eligible activities, okay? And then there's a whole list of things that you can do, okay? And under the section for doors and windows, it says preserve, rehabilitate, restore historic and windows, including frames and hardware. But then it has a semicolon, and it says may include replacement with original or energy-efficient replications of original doors and windows. So there's that little loophole that I see. I mean, I don't know who decides what is, what the meaning of replication is, but we've got that little statement in here under eligible activities. So it seems to me that if we say may include replacement with original or energy-efficient replications, then they can do it per the guidelines. Now, the thing that is confusing to me is that we can comply with the guidelines and not comply with Secretary of Interior standards. And I still have trouble with that. I mean, why do we write guidelines that don't comply with Secretary of Interior standards? And by the way, I did a silly thing the other day. I walked all the way up and down Birch Street because this house on Ash, almost all of the houses on Birch Street have exactly the same windows. And every single one of those houses, I'll back up a little, not every single, because there's a couple of houses there that aren't contributing. Most of those houses have been, if we look at the ARA forms done by Northwind, they all say those houses have wooden windows, but that's not true. Because there's at least 7 houses with exactly the same windows that are vinyl or something. They aren't wood. They all are, again, all of the ones, the ARA forms have classified every single one of them as contributing, and most of them are eligible for listing on the National Register. Now, my point is, if some of those houses have vinyl windows, if they've replaced, and they've obviously replaced the old wooden windows, and they're still not only contributing, but they're eligible for listing, then there's got to be some wiggle room somewhere, because either those people have replaced those windows under the old, which they may have, or or they've done it, if they got a building permit to replace the windows that never came before the Historic Preservation Committee. But it seems to me, I guess the point I'm making here is there is so much ambiguity involved in this question of either repairing or replacing like with like, that there's got to be some wiggle room for folks like these that have done everything they can do short of going to New England and hiring somebody that knows something about wooden windows. Because you can't tell the difference. You can't tell the difference. And I understand that we want to have guidelines that are mandatory. But the guidelines need to respond, I think, somehow to reality. And the reality is that as things are now, folks get caught in this catch-22. Now, the option is to say, well, screw it, I'm going to put in vinyl windows, and I just won't be contributing anymore. So, I don't know. To me, it's a quandary, and it's a catch-22, and I don't know. I'm not wise enough as Samson was to.
So I wonder if, is it possible for us as a committee to ask the property owner for additional information on the windows that he has chosen? Because unfortunately, I can't see the windows, what the material is really, and what the measurements are for the entire window. And maybe I'm just not reading this correctly. And are these vinyl or, is generally a no-no, and as far as I understand, rather than aluminum clad is a better material or more closely resembles or more appropriate for a historic replacement window.
Yeah, the applicant's proposing fiberglass windows, specifically Pella Impervia fiberglass.
Well, I'd make one other point here, because we're in another kind of a strange situation here, because we have now become a commission, and we have an ordinance that mandates a COA, but we're operating with guidelines that were done under the old, and we don't have new guidelines yet. The old guidelines don't specify wood. So so I don't know. I can't, in good conscience, deny access to some of the grant funds. I think that there have been enough. Well, I won't go there, but unless we can come up with some clearer solutions to these problems, and I understand what you're doing, Michael, and I applaud it, and I think that ultimately might be the solution, but we aren't there yet. So anybody that wants to do their windows right now, they're caught in this catch-22. They're damned if they do, damned if they don't. So,
Kind of a question for Michael, maybe help me out, on, like Charlie says, some stuff's ambiguous. The whole idea, my personal concept was, the historic preservation grant, basically it was to help assist, homeowners keep their homes historic for, under our purview, and our purview is basically the front of the building, what we can see from the street. So my question is, all right, so on the grant money, are we looking at granting assistance to the front of the house, or are we going to go and grant money to replace every window in somebody's house? Where, you know, the sides and the rear and stuff like that, that's nothing to do with us, shall we say. I mean, my thought is, you know, that if we grant assistance, it'd be granting assistance on, you know, what's viewable from the street. So if there's 3 windows on the front, we would grant assistance with those 3 windows, but not the whole house. I mean, it's just, you know, somebody's added on a porch in the back, and it's, you know, it's all closed in with 27 windows, and they're including that in the future. I'm not talking about this particular one here. You know, they're really funding, you know, 27 additional windows and a closed-in screened porch in the back that can't even be seen from the alley. I mean, you know, do we have a line that's drawn someplace or not? I'm just kind of, I need a little help here from.
Well, actually, I had the same question, because Mr. Kohler wants to do 18 windows, and I'm not too sure that, that even if we granted the grant money, that we would include all 18 windows, because the only purview we have is what's visible from the street. So I don't know how many windows, you know, if there was 9, but that might affect the amount of the grant money, but it wouldn't affect whether or not you grant the grant money. So, but that's a point, yes.
Well, ultimately, the guidelines didn't specify that improvements were only for those seen from the street. It is true that with the Historic Preservation Ordinance, what you're regulating is the frontage or what parts of structures can be seen from the street, and not regulating interior remodels or rear additions that cannot be seen. But again, the overall intent of this grant program was to encourage property owners to contact the city to get guidance on improvements that would retain or convert their homes from non-contributing to contributing, but for those that are contributing, to retain the status of contributing properties as an incentive. And so, I mean, you could, you know, reevaluate the design guide, or I'm sorry, you could reevaluate the grant guidelines and limit, you know, where the dollars can go to, but then would it still be an incentive, again, for people to go through the process and help keep their properties contributing. And let me just further point out, in particular with windows, the condition of the windows, the style of the windows, is a contributing factor to whether that property is contributing to the district or not. However, if you replace windows and don't change the size of the openings, you are not required to get a building permit from the city. And so again, this is where this grant, instead of somebody going in and replacing the windows with something that is not original, and as a result could take it from contributing to non-contributing, this is the grant that incentivizes people to replace the windows with something historical.
Michael, if I may, I'm kind of, my thinking along that is, you know, like, is to help the people to restore, like, all right, the front windows face the street, okay, to keep them in compliance, da-da-da-da. Those windows could possibly be very, very expensive, whereas the windows going on the side, they can go down to Lowe's or Home Depot, whatever, and buy whatever's off the shelf and stick it in there. And, which is fine, you know, it saves the money and stuff like that. But my mind was, you know, the expensive part would be the windows that face the street. You know, that's where it might come into custom work, or, you know, that's where the help would be required for financially, is to help them out with those windows. I mean, just, You gotta replace the windows inside the house, that's just, that's normal maintenance. I had to replace all the windows in my house. It just is, it is what it is. But, the part we're concerned about is the front, and those windows, which could be expensive to replicate, get, whoever to do this, that, and the other thing. That's where, my thought is that the money should go to, is, to help them to do that, to maintain the front of that house. Yeah, they gotta put a $2,000 window in as compared to a $200 window on the side of the house. But we can help them with that $2,000 window because it is very expensive to do. That's kind of where my thought process was on the whole grant thing, I might be off base and stuff, but that's where, in my heart, that's where we should be directed, to help people, with that expensive part. If they got an expensive window replaced, that's where we can help out. Off the shelf, going down the side of the house, that's fine, that's up to the homeowner, that's just normal maintenance, take care of your house. It's kind of my thought and where I'm going at.
I'm confused, as usual. My understanding is that there's a matrix that decides on who looks at what, and the matrix has a little X under if it's a contributing building, and it deals with windows, then that's, staff looks at that. So what I understand is, we can only, as far as what we're doing here, we can only decide whether or not to give grant money to this project. But if we decide not to give grant money to this project, and the owner goes ahead with it and puts in vinyl windows, because if he doesn't change the size of the hole, he doesn't need to get a building permit, so he doesn't have to go to anybody. But now he's got vinyl windows in his house that at one time was contributing, but now, because it's got vinyl windows instead of wood windows, his house is no longer contributing. Is that right?
That could potentially be the impact with
Okay.
that, yes.
So we've lost another house. I mean, the city has. And we've lost another contributing house because the house is no longer contributing because it got vinyl windows in it. It just seems to me that,
What about if, as a committee, if we were to get a little more information about the windows that are chosen, the Pella windows, and see if in fact they are an exact replica of the original? Would that work for us to consider? And and then I think, just to address what you said, that we only are addressing the front of a building. I think it's the view of the building from the public right away. And so you can see the sides of the building. You can't see, generally you can see the sides of the building. The back, no, but I also think that this grant is for the preservation of the building. And so I think it could include things that you can't see, because we're trying to preserve that building as a whole, not just the front. But,
yeah,
so,
no, I buy
that's-
that, yeah. That's,
But I mean, what do you think? I mean, is it possible to get more information about the windows that you're considering and see?
Well,
How does it compare
yeah.
to the original window versus the new window?
What I can suggest is this, because there's going to probably be more people to come up with the same thing that I want to do. And so I have done a little bit of research with the Pella and stuff, and they sent me pictures, but it was not of the same design and everything. But I can do some more research on it and try to find actual sample window as close. And then I can get like blueprints of what the closest they can get to the window. And then drawings, technical drawings of it. And then a sample of a window that might not be exactly the same size, but so we can take a look at the window and then look at the technical sizing and everything on it, and then pick out one that's gonna work, and then the next guy going, hey, these are nice, you know, these might work. So I'd be willing to do that.
That would be super swell of you.
Yeah,
That
then
would be-
that would solve the problem.
That would
Yeah.
help us, the community,
Yeah,
a lot, I think.
yeah, because otherwise it's apples and oranges, this, you know, this, are the windows really gonna look the same? Yeah, so I'm willing to do that, yeah.
Well, that'd be a good thing, because, you
Yeah.
know, you're the first one going through this process.
Yeah.
So, and this is the first time we're dealing with the process, so
Exactly.
it'd be good if if the community and us could work together and
Yeah.
come up with some good solid answers, and where you can be happy, and we can be happy, and everybody's happy. Yeah.
Everybody's happy, I like
And then-
that.
It's tough to do, but, you know, we're in a good position to try and do it with,
Okay.
if your willingness to help and stuff like that, that'll be,
Okay.
help us, you know, because this is all new process to us, it's new process to you, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
I
Okay,
would reach
let's work
out.
on that, and I'll work with
also-
Michael to
okay.
try to coordinate getting the things to, for hopefully maybe for the next weekend meeting or the one following. Okay?
And Bob, if I could ask, did your Pella bid actually break out the costs per window? Because as the committee is discussing this, even though the grant doesn't technically limit improvements to the front of the home, the fact is there's still a $10,000 max grant available for any one applicant.
Yeah,
So I'm sure they'd probably be interested in terms of all the front windows, for whatever product or example you can come up with that might work.
Yeah.
What's the actual value of the cost of the windows on the front of the home?
yeah.
You
and
know, so that they
our-
can not even think about 18 windows and just really think,
On our property,
Yeah.
there's like 14 or so on the front, and there's like, I think, 4 or 5 on the back, so.
oh, really?
Yeah, it's all the front,
Oh,
it's all the
okay.
windows. Yeah, so there's not very many windows in the back,
Gotcha.
so, yeah. Okay,
So, Madam Chair, if we can have a motion to hold this item over till the next meeting, and then we'll present the additional information for your review.
Okay, but I do want to make a comment about the, what is it, 1,300?
Well, this is just an action on this.
Okay,
Item A.
on this particular,
I-
okay,
yeah.
fine, yeah.
So can I have a motion on this project?
I'll make a motion to table it till the next scheduled meeting to readdress this agenda item.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank
Good
you,
deal.
Bob.
okay, see you next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
So then now we should address the second property, and I make a motion that we not consider it?
No, I want,
Oh,
I want to make some, yeah. I want to make some comments, and then, yeah.
We're talking about.
Yeah.
Talking about 1,300.
1,300, okay?
Madam Chair, the applicant for 1300 Colorado is here and would like to address the
Yeah.
great,
commission.
please go ahead.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for your time. Second of all, I want to apologize.
Could you state your name, please?
My name is John Madrid, and Robin Baker is with me, and we are the current owners of 1300 Colorado Street. But I do want to apologize for really, do I blame COVID, or do I blame the economy, or what? But the situation is that when we originally applied for this grant, I think it was, I don't know if it was 3 months ago or 4 months ago. I tried to get some updates. There was, somebody had COVID, somebody went on vacation, so there were numerous very understandable delays. In the meantime, we ordered the windows because we went to the window company. They said, you're looking at a 4 to 6 month delay. And so I said, well, no problem. Well, I'm sure that we'll go before the city, probably in half that time. Well, as it turned out, because of the delays, we received a phone call last week from the window company, and they were very kind and polite, and they said, we can install your windows, start installing them this week, or, I said, or what? And they said, well, we'll have to put you back on the delay list. I go, what do you mean the delay list? And they said, well, another 4 to 6 months. And really, we're talking about safety and health issues. Yes, there's a historic value to it, but really there's a historic value, but the safety and ecology issues. Number one, these windows are all single pane. We had an air conditioning system that blew up, and that cost us $22,000 to replace the entire system. And you know, when the guy came out and did it, he goes, "Well, you know, this whole house is single pane windows." He goes, "Your 3-ton systems is working 10 times too hard. You got air leaks all over the house, and you know, and so you know, so we had to make a choice." Okay, and I know that I spoke with Michael Mays, who's been very helpful, and you know, he said that you know you're supposed to wait until the grant is approved and signed by everybody before you start construction, okay? But because of our situation, you know, the other thing too, the safety issue is that the previous, when we bought the house, of the windows that we're replacing, 2 of the windows are operable. The other ones are fixed. So if there ever was a fire inside of our house, unless I threw a chair through the window, I'm going to burn to death, or whoever's there. So, you know, we've got safety issues. And so I'd like you to consider the situation, you know, even though I go, yeah, I'm sorry but, you know, I didn't want to wait another 6 months because do I rent a hotel for 6 months in case there's a fire? I already bought a brand new air conditioner and heating system because what was there broke it. You know, he just said, goes, hey, you know what? If you don't replace these windows and vents and doors, you're going to have a problem. Same thing's going to happen to this system. He goes, it's like running a heater and air conditioner with all your windows and doors open. So, you know, and you talk about historical design, and just as Mr. Hans said there, that there is a clause in there that says you can replace the original windows with new and modern materials, like instead of single pane, dual pane, and stuff like that. But for when we bought the house, it's impossible. We couldn't fix those windows if you said, I'm going to give you $20 million, fix those windows. I couldn't do it. Why? Because when we bought the house, all the windows in the house have been replaced with vinyl windows, of which only 2 of them were operable. So where they came from, I have no idea. But again, as you call it, a loophole, says that original windows can be replaced with modern materials. And so fortunately, when we bought the house, they gave us an original photo of the house. And I passed that on to Mr. Charles Hans there. I don't know if he shared it with y'all, but the windows on it were very clear. There are 2 windows, and I'm sure that they were, you can't tell because you can't see, but I'm sure that they were the old-fashioned crank-out windows. Okay, well, when I talked to the windows guy, he said, if you want the crank-outs, you know, I'd be ready to spend $30,000 or more. And then he says, but, he goes, we can design these windows that when you look at it from the street, they'll look exactly like the old original windows, because I gave them the original picture too. And so if you could check with Mr. Hans about the original windows, and they were not 6-pane windows. They were just 2 vertical windows. Okay, and that was the historic integrity. So do you want the historic integrity from the 1980s or from when it was originally built? That's a question. You know, but I bought the house we love the house, and we've done a whole bunch of interior stuff that we didn't have to do to preserve the historic integrity of the house. And so what I would like you to do is to reconsider, even though I know I've started the construction, but reconsider the grant, because I know that it's, COVID delays. It's out of my control, it's out of your control, it's out of everybody's control. But don't penalize me for trying to, number one, preserve the historic visual of the windows, or the quality of them as far as energy and safety. And also, on this report right here, I think you probably all have it, but in it, it says that the replacement of the original windows diminishes the integrity of the materials. Okay, but it also goes on to say that it continues to retain its original form and massing in the most historic fabric of the building. And it goes on, it says, Northwind, I don't know that company, but Northwind says, Northwind concurs with the previous determination that 1300 Colorado is eligible for listing in the NRHP as a contributing resource. And that's what we'd like to do. I don't want to walk in here and say, oh, by the way, take me off the list. It's a historic home, we like it, and we want to keep it. So,
Thank you.
thank you so much.
So I'm a little confused by this building or this window. Is it 6 lights? Is it divided light windows originally?
Let me comment here, because I looked into this house because it intrigued me. There seems to be the original house. When I say original, 1932, the house was built in 1932. The original house had the metal open, what do you call it? Yeah. At some point, those windows were replaced by, and those windows, by the way, were 6 by 6 and whatever the 6 by 6 and double hung 6/1 and so on. And those windows were still in place when Janice did the report in 1982. So if you look at the 1982 photos, you see those original metal windows. But apparently sometime after 1982, those windows were removed and replaced by vinyl windows that had a single, and this is the picture that the owners showed me, the vinyl windows that had a single muntin, I think. If you get,
I'm Robin Baker, so it's nice to meet you. Sorry to elaborate on this. The original windows, the photo that we had, we saw one
Right.
line down the front. And in the 1982, there is now a grid. And then the grid, when we bought the house had vinyl windows, which didn't open and did match. I mean, there were, some of the windows in the house were matching, some were not. And I realize all of these issues were really not your problem. The bigger issue is that we want to maintain the integrity of the house, and as I'm hearing you speak today, that's important to all of you. And on our house in particular, we have all of the windows, but 4 can be seen because we're on a triangular lot. And we have, so the view's skewed from the park and from Colorado Street. So we would have all of our windows but 4 that possibly would be eligible. And I appreciate very much the grant. In the future, what I would ask that came out of today and speaking with Charles about this, is that there are more specific guidelines so that we knew exactly what the expectation was. Because we did read the grant and we read about the safety issue. And not being able to open your windows in the middle of summer when your air conditioner is not working is, it becomes a huge issue. So there's multiple layers for everyone, and living in an older home that you want to maintain the integrity of has its challenges. So if there were exact specifications, or there were people within the community who could assist you, and I was just talking with Courtney about that, who maybe knew materials. The cost of getting wood, and we couldn't find wood windows to replace. They would have been aluminum clad wood. So, but the cost was prohibitive, and even with the grant, it was just prohibitive. And so we did the best we could. We hope we're going to still be qualifying. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, because now I'm a little worried that we might not be qualifying. But, we'll just see how it goes, and we do appreciate your time. Thank you.
Well, the point that I'm getting at is, and this involves Northwind again, because the ARA for this building, and now I've lost it, right here, this was listed as contributing, okay? It's a contributing property with the windows that are shown in this picture, okay? So this is the 2020 picture, okay? They're vinyl windows. And this is what bugs me, is if the windows are character-defining features, how can you put in non-contributing windows and then still keep it a contributing property, okay? Because, and then to go beyond that, these folks would be replacing a vinyl window with another vinyl window. So what's the problem? We aren't expecting them. There was no reason for them to have to go back to a metal window, because that metal window was long gone. And when they bought the house had vinyl windows in it. And they want to replace the vinyl windows. So what's wrong with replacing vinyl windows with vinyl windows? I'm confused, okay?
So to address your first question, is how it was considered contributing. Because the windows were basically the only strike against the house. It retains its massing and all of the other character-defining features. And the windows themselves still kind of, were the same shape and relatively same style. And we've explained our kind of 3 strikes rule before. So the house had most of its qualities to be considered contributing. So the reason that the windows that they're proposing do not meet the standards is because they don't match what was there historically. And we received an image from the museum where an older image, I don't know if that's in the packet or not. I know that my image from 1982 that I added is, but the older image it's faint, but you can clearly see the divided lights. Additionally, all the other homes that were built by that builder during that time had the divided lights. I also contacted local historian Dennis McBride, and he concurred with me. There is no way that any home would have had a casement window without divided lights in the 1930s. So that's why the Secretary of the Interior why they don't meet the standard. The windows that are being proposed do not meet the standards. Also vinyl and also sliding. So again, the committee can take that information however they want, but that's the interpretation of the standards.
But the problem is now, I mean, to actually comply then, the only thing they could do would be to put metal casement windows back in. I mean,
Well, no, not necessarily metal, but
well, wait a minute,
casement.
that's what they were originally. They were steel, well, or aluminum.
Because they're replacing non-original, then they can get as close as possible to the original windows.
Okay, all right.
It'll match the old design, color, texture, and where possible materials. So as long as the design, color, texture, and I think that it should be added function, whether it's a sash, fixed, or casement window. If they were to replace their windows with a modern casement style, that was the same design, color, texture, and it's a casement, then I think the grant money could be used for that. But what I see are just plain windows. There's nothing that shows multiple lights.
Well, because the windows that they were replacing weren't,
Right, and I don't know, that just doesn't make sense.
anyway.
Although the picture doesn't show that. Yeah, this is divided,
Right, right.
but they're not replacing that with a divided light.
But when they bought the house, the window that was in there didn't have those divided lights. So they were replacing what they thought were original windows with original,
Oh, when they bought the house.
when they bought the house.
Gotcha.
This is the first time the windows are being replaced by these property owners, correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So when they bought the property, the picture that's in the ARA form is what the windows look like.
Right,
So they did have divided lights, but they're fake.
right,
Right.
right. But they have photos when they bought the property of what the windows looked like before these windows, okay? So they were
And-
going back to
right.
looking like the windows
And-
they believed were the,
And we looked at the landscaping and it was all new growth and, I mean, you know,
Yeah.
you look at all of those.
Right.
yeah.
We can't have people
Yeah, we-
talking to the
yeah,
audience.
yeah.
It's my opinion, based on the other models and the drawings provided by Reclamation, the builder, and Dennis McBride, who's a very respected local historian, that the picture is fuzzy.
Yeah.
That original photo is fuzzy, so you can't see the horizontal muntins. It just wasn't a thing in the 1930s to put a casement window without divided lights like that.
So that I'm not screaming at the audience, I will ask you folks, did the homeowners consult with you before they purchased their windows?
Yes, we had a conference call with them and provide them guidance on the type of windows to look at.
And you suggested divided lights and/or casement windows?
Correct.
Okay. So should I can I ask them to come forward to say, then why did you not go with the recommendation from the city?
I furnished everybody, I believe. I sent Michael Mays an email with we received a original photo of the house, of the front of the house. And the front of the house, the windows are clearly not 6-pane windows. There's 2 windows like that, and I'm sure they opened up, they cranked open at those days. That's what the picture shows. And the picture shows there's numerous of the whole front of the house, and I blew it up, and there's no panes in it. And oh, by the way, all the windows that we put in for the grant can be seen from the street. The windows in the back of the house, we are not replacing.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
So, but I do understand that if historically in the area, windows were 6-paned. And when I look around at our neighborhood, it's true. But I also, the deciding factor for us when we went ahead and, because we had submitted the photo, we did not, at least if we did, I, for whatever reason, didn't hear it, and I apologize for that. But when I looked at the windows, I knew that by reading about Boulder City, that the architects and the builders did make detail changes in the construction, whether it was in the interior. So even though those windows, the photos are they're not clear. I thought at the time that it was a possibility because the people from whom we bought the house were the grandchildren of the people who originally owned it. And they told us that was an original photo. We didn't, and I apologize, I didn't research it as much as I possibly should have. But, so I didn't understand that the windows were possibly not one of those changes that they made.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, thank you for the clarification.
Well, thank you for coming and explaining, and
Well, sure.
I appreciate it. But I believe our hands are tied because the project continued unless, Michael, I mean,
Well, I'm
go
gonna
by
ask-
your guidance on if we
Ask
can
a
even
question?
respond.
Can I ask- I'm just gonna ask a question here of Michael and stuff. I mean, it looks like, they applied for the grant last July. And now we're not seeing until December. So, I mean, I think that's kind of, now, I don't know why the delay was. I mean, if it was from, this side of the table, from the city and here, whatever, that it was delayed and delayed and delayed, and, the homeowner had, in good faith, applied for it in July, and now, due to issues that, the windows are here, they've been ordered, they've got to start putting them in, or they, whatever, I can understand them having to go forward, so my question is, all right, if the delay was due to the city and this committee or whatever, through no fault of the homeowners, they're kind of forced to get started because of an unusual delay that was caused by somebody other than them. Could we overlook the thing that they've started because it was not their fault and, they're forced to start because of delays from the city or whatever? I don't know how it went, but I mean, they started this process in July and now we're in December before they get a hearing, shall we say. I mean, that's kind of not fair to the
So
applicants.
once again, this is Robin Baker speaking. However, I don't want to have discourse on the committee. So we're going to withdraw, and I know John's going to go, but we're going to withdraw our application because I'll tell you what, to be honest with you, we do want to maintain, take a deep breath, we do want to maintain a relationship with the city, the community, the committee, and we're going to continue to try to restore this house and maintain the integrity of it because it's important to us. And so, but these are issues that I hope you do address at some point in time. And even if we don't benefit, the specifications and the clarifications will benefit others, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll be seeing you again, and so will Johnny.
Thank you so much.
I'm sorry, but I also signed that application. I am not withdrawing it. My signature is still wet on it and permanent. And I'd like you to consider the circumstances, and if there's any way you consider it, I would sure appreciate it. Because
That's what
we're trying
my question
to.
was to Michael.
Thank you.
To see if we can, that's what my question is to Michael, if there is something we can do or not do. I mean, are our hands tied or,
Thank you.
I'm just,
Can we stop? Hold it. So I see that they put in a submission in July. However, there's a memo that they wrote in August. So what is the timeline of this process and
Yeah,
until we get
that's-
here?
yeah,
So that's
that's-
it. That's the question.
Okay, so to respond to that question, obviously, depending on the application, what's submitted, whether it's complete or incomplete, sometimes there's time where we're asking for more information so we can evaluate. There's also the time involved in the consult. We, with every application, once we believe we have enough information to evaluate, we send it to Courtney for her review, and we set up a consult with the applicant to talk through what they're proposing. And after Courtney's review of the Secretary of Interior standards, the design guidelines, and the surveys of the original property, we provide feedback and guidance to say, to comply with this grant, these are the recommendations to be able to accomplish that. Because again, we're following through with the guidelines that were established by the commission and adopted by the city council. The intent here and now is you have the guidelines that you created, you have the application, you determine whether it meets the guidelines or not and make a recommendation to the city council. And maybe just to further expand, because there's been a lot of discussion on dollar amounts and value, really the role of the commission is not to determine the financial aspect of this. That's the city council to determine if they want to provide the grant or not. It's for you to evaluate whether this meets the guidelines or not, whether it meets the intent to preserve historical properties, and as a result, the application is worthy for receiving an incentive for the improvements that they're proposing.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Just a real quick follow-up on, so basically the timeline that this took could be a typical and normal for future applications then? I mean, it's not an unrealistic time frame from when they started the application to get approved, to get to the point where it's in front of us. It's kind of a.
Correct. I mean, it all depends on how complete the application is initially, what additional information staff is looking for. You are going to have some varied timelines.
Okay.
Obviously, it's our commitment to bring these forward once we feel that we have as much information as we need to evaluate and present to the commission.
Yeah, so we could see this kind of a timeline, again, on another application down the road. This is not something out of the ordinary. This can happen again, and just following the procedures that have to be followed.
Yeah, it could happen again,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, no, that's fine. That's what I want to know, is it just, was there unusual delays, or it just took this long for the process to work? No, and it sounds like it just took this long for the process to work. Okay, thank you.
Okay, for clarification then, as I understand it, we just start judging whether or not it meets the guidelines. We aren't deciding whether or not it meets the Secretary of Interior standards, because Courtney has said, as the guidelines are not accurate in this instance, an evaluation of compatibility with the guidelines is not possible. That's in terms of 1300. She says in on the 504 Ash, it says 4-pane double window, therefore the current application meets the guidelines as no material is specified. So they meet the guidelines, both of them. So,
Point of clarification, Member Hans, the second application doesn't meet the guideline regarding they can't proceed with the work
Well,
until after approval.
yeah, right, but that's sort of after that just happened yesterday or day before yesterday. I mean, but my point is, as I understand this, looking at the matrix, the only thing that this commission can do is evaluate guidelines. We don't make a judgment as to whether or not it complies with Secretary of Interior standards, because that's up to the staff. Because the little X is on the staff box.
I think you may be referring to the decision matrix as it relates to the ordinance.
Yeah, which way it goes, yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't apply here. That's the decision matrix relative to certificate of appropriateness and who reviews a building permit application to ensure compliance.
So we don't do any of that. All we are is looking at the guidelines. That's what I'm asking.
For this application, the intent is that the city council is looking for your guidance on whether they should award this grant or not based on adherence to the guidelines.
Okay.
The guidelines for the grant.
The grant guidelines.
Correct.
Not the design guidelines. Sorry.
Right, the grant guidelines, yeah.
But we are also looking at the Secretary of Interior standards,
Yes,
so.
because that's contained in the guidelines.
So we have two things to review a project on.
It's in the grant guidelines, yes. Yeah, okay. Okay, all right, yeah.
I feel like we need to relook at the grant guidelines and eliminate these discrepancies, or make them, or clarify them. I don't know if that's something I can ask you and your staff to address, and come up with some suggestions.
If you could wait until agenda item 12 to give direction on future staff items.
Yep.
Because right now, you're just weighing in on the appropriateness of these two applications and whether they comply with the grant guidelines.
I propose that this project is not, cannot be funded because it doesn't meet the section of the grant guidelines that states the project cannot be awarded if the project has started, or however you write that, or you.
For the 1,300.
We already did the first property, we're doing 1,300. So, I can't even find.
I don't think we have to do anything with 1,300, do we?
Well, you looking for a motion to deny the grant, basically? If you want, I'll put
But I
something
want to
together
deny
for you.
it, yeah, but based on not the
I'd make a
whole
motion, we deny the grant because work has already started, which is in violation of the guidelines.
Point of order, it's still a recommendation to the city council.
I'll change,
Unless Michael indicates that it's ineligible and can't be forwarded.
No,
okay,
no,
I'll make a
no,
recommend,
your
I'll make a
recommendation
recommendation
to deny.
that we do not go forward with it because they fell out of guidelines by started construction before it is approved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes. Okay. Agenda item number 7, for possible action, update on implementation of the commission goals and priorities.
This is the usual report to the commission on the status of the goals contained within the Historic Preservation Plan. Any questions?
Anything from you?
I don't have any, I think this one, yeah, this is, I think we can zip right on by
Yep.
this one. I don't have any.
Let's move to 8.
It doesn't seem like there are any comments or suggestions on this. So I will move on to agenda item number 8, for possible action, discussion regarding activities for Historic Preservation Day and award.
Thank you. The report notes that at the last meeting, the members present voted on holding HP Day on May 13th. And that means that the staff report contains a schedule of activities related to both the award and HP Day, or at least in terms of minimum deadlines that we would be working on in terms of advertising this to the public. So for the event, members can start discussing your ideas for what you want to do for HP Day 2023. Regarding the award, the one item that staff requests that you provide direction on tonight is that since per the timeline, the flyer that would go out with the utility mailers to invite the public to make nominations for the award, that would go out in the February utility mailer. And due to the extreme advanced deadlines we have for that, that has to be ready early January. And so since you don't have your next meeting until late January, we need to know tonight if basically we can just update the flyer that we have in the packet from February 2022, and just update the dates and put the photo of last year's winner there, and if that's going to be satisfactory for the purpose of inviting people to nominate. The website's still a separate matter. You'll still need to give us guidance on, for when, come February, when we would make the website info live for people to make nominations, then citizens would need to know what the rules for that are, and that's, the samples from last year start on page 200 of the packet. You don't necessarily have to provide those suggested changes to us tonight. That can still be discussed at the January meeting, Or you can also email your comments separately to staff or give us a call if you've got suggestions for that. Or again, you know, if you do have ideas for that, you can mention that tonight as well. But the one thing for certain we need to know tonight is with regard to update of the flyer that will go out in February.
I think that the flyer needs to go out in February, and the format that's here now looks good to me.
Yeah, just correct the dates and call it good.
Yep, and we'll put the photo of last year's winner in there as an update as well. It's a pretty simple update. I'll just have to forward it to our public information staff just to make sure she isn't going to be requiring any other substantive changes due to however she's doing those now.
Do we want to talk about Historic Preservation Day and where we're going? Kind of some general, or let's try and be more specific as far as what we want to plan for either that month or that day. And then talk about the award.
Do we need to talk about the awards? We need to talk about the awards.
Let's talk about the day first.
Let me start, since I do have a little, this is a suggestion, and just as a start. The thing that I would like to see with this Historic Preservation Day is an emphasis on the railroad. Because the railroad was critical to the building of not only the dam, but also Boulder City, and not only building of Boulder City, but maintaining Boulder City in those early years, because it supplied, the railroad virtually supplied everything to the city. I mean, in terms of material and food and whatnot. So I'd like to have an emphasis, if we could, on the railroad. Now, I haven't really digested that in terms of specific items, but that would be the focus, and I'd like to see that be the focus for discussion, because for the filtration plant, for instance, I mean, that's an integral part of the railroad. I mean, the railroad brought the chemicals into so that building applies. Virtually all of the buildings in town have some connection to the railroad in some way or another. So if we could come up with ways to focus our discussions or whatever we're gonna do on the railroad. And by the way, I haven't talked to the railroad yet, because I wanted to get some input from you guys as to whether or not that's a viable sort of thing to do. And if it is, I mean, then obviously the railroad's gonna have to participate, so we're gonna have to work with them. And I'm willing to do that, I mean, so.
Well, it's a good idea to start thinking about something. I mean, but the only thing is, we got the Railroad Museum, railroad rides, and what the old tunnels going down by the dam. I mean, those are the only really remnants of the railroad that are here. So I'm not sure how we'd be, I mean, I like the idea, but I don't know how we could incorporate. What could we do to incorporate, the public into doing
You've got all the
something?
rolling stock, you've got the tunnels, you've got the filtration plant. Et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah, I could see us having a fun event at the filtration plant and talk about the railway car pulling up outside and unloading all the materials and stuff like that. We could come up with a fun little event for that.
So you're thinking using the filtration plant as kind of the focal point or the center point of Historic Preservation Day?
Well, I'm thinking about using the Railroad Museum as a center point of the.
Yeah,
the,
I agree.
I mean, there's no reason not to, as long as, again, I haven't talked to the railroad, so if we're gonna make that the focal point, they need to be aware of it and need to participate. And so if if you think it's not a bad idea, I will begin contact with Chris McMahon and Dave Held and the Friends of the Railroad, Chuck Lennon and so on. But I would think that they certainly have enough area down there to accommodate a crowd, if we have a crowd. And then what I would like to see, and my idea would be that we've always had a place where you begin, and then we've doled out different events around. And the problem is the railroad always ends up being at the end of the day, and nobody goes, because it's the end of the day and they're way down there, and how are you going to get there? I thought if you start down there and let them do their spiel, and then people would come this way and do whatever we're going to do around town relative to the railroad. But the Railroad Museum would be the focal point, and I'm sure that they would, they would be happy with that. I mean, they're all excited about their new museum going to be built and so on. So,
Well, yeah, starting at the Railroad Museum is a good idea, and maybe even ending it there. I mean, there's a lot, I don't know if they can do it if you're going to talk to them, but, they've got the repair shop down there, that might be of interest to, as part of it. People walk down and look at that. Like I say, talk about the, just maybe have everything right there. It's Railroad Day, Historic Preservation Railroad Day. And just do everything right there and encourage people to come in that have never walked around the rolling stock that's available to look at and to go into and stuff.
So one of the things I'm kind of, just want to emphasize is that even though the theme is railroad history in Boulder City, it's Historic Preservation Month and Day. And so I would like to see whatever, if we go with that theme, that we need to circle back to what preservation or conservation projects are associated with those sites, such as the water filtration plant or the Railroad Museum. So the Railroad Museum, they work on their rolling stock, they're conserving it. There should be some presentation about that. We're working on the the water treatment plan and the work we've done on the roof, and then their future plans for the preservation of that. I'm happy to go talk to the National Park Service because they have a safety first building that was part of the railroad. They did some preservation on that. The tunnels, there's been some preservation on those. There's also that Waite building, I think that's what it's called, that Father...
oh, yeah.
Somebody, I can't remember. Oh, he's a senior, not a father. Perhaps we could work with them to have that on the tour, and that would.
For
Anyway.
keeping notes, what building did you call it? Week building?
Wait. I
Wait?
think it was
W-A-I-T?
W-E-I-G-H-T.
Oh.
Kiosk building that's right there next to the Monster Museum.
That little bitty building?
Yeah,
Right.
it's a little square gray building. It's the oldest extant building in Boulder City, by the
Wait, do
way.
you mean the ticket office?
Yeah,
Oh,
but it's not a
Technically.
passenger ticket office. It was the ticket office for the distribution of the oil products that were going in and out and so on.
That's
So,
right.
But anyway, yeah, there's that building there. In fact, I think the building behind it was also,
The whole,
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's those buildings, yeah.
I was going to say we could approach Greg. His last name is Gordon,
Gordon, yeah.
Monsignor Greg Gordon, and he did a
great,
little
yeah.
lecture for us down there that we videotaped.
Yeah, he did a great presentation on that.
So I believe I have his number. But anyway, I think that would be. He was great. He did a great little lecture down there.
So I guess my question is, do we want to do what we do normally, and that is we have this big get-together where the entire public meets? Or is it more like we're providing... Are we providing a map and then the general public just decides, hops around to these different locations that are staged with either information or people to provide information? I can't think of what kind of a presentation where we would want to have a panel or a conversation or a presentation with a whole group of people all at once. Unless you guys, I can't think
Yeah,
of something.
last year, you know, there's all this stuff coming up, you know, we had a cause for a panel, you know, for questions about the whole historic preservation guidelines and stuff, but like, I agree with this. If we do the railroad, there's really nothing for a group panel. I mean, you know, maybe somebody from the railroad could have an area where they would, you know, at maybe 9 o'clock or whatever, they'd give a little talk about the current museum and proposed museum or something, you know, to start the day off with, if they'd be willing to do that.
Well, that's what I'd have in mind, yeah,
Yeah.
somebody talk about the history of the railroad and yeah. But I agree, Blair, that, yeah, we could have places, well, obviously Ray has done the filtration plant enough that he can probably do it by heart, the presentation there, so, yeah.
So if there are, if we're looking, because one of the things we've also talked about are, Michael brought this up, and that is if we want to talk more about historic landscapes and streetscapes, maybe we don't do that on Historic Preservation Day, but that's maybe another day within that month that we
We could do that.
call the public together or present something or,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it is historic preservation.
It's a month, so
yeah,
we could
yeah.
do something, you know, on another date.
Sure. And by the way, we can have no more than 2 commission members. We can have 2 people get together and discuss this.
So is there
Ray,
any
if I understand, is that right?
clarification on that?
So, yeah, Susan, yeah.
According to the city clerk's office, that's what they've told us
All right,
as of
good.
today. We'll let
So-
you know if there are any changes.
We
She
won't
did
call
want
it a
to
subcommittee, but we can have 2 people.
consult with the city attorney and have her check with the attorney general, I think. But that might be for other future changes.
Yeah,
But
that
as of right now, yes, that's what we've been told.
Hallelujah, thank you. All right, do we all agree that we're going to shoot for a railroad theme day? And Charlie, will you take care of going to the museum, to the Railroad Museum and talking to them?
Yes, I will, well, actually, next week, I'll at least make the initial contact. I'm sure they're right in the middle of their Christmas stuff and et cetera and et cetera.
As
but
long as
yeah.
it's any time before our January meeting, so that you get
Oh, yeah, so I
information
can
and
come
report
with-
back.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
no, I will.
And Glenn, what do you want to take on?
I haven't got a clue.
Well, I can give you something.
I can go with Charlie to the museum.
There you go. And Ray, I'm assuming you're gonna, filtration plant. Would you mind working, or I can work with you too, I guess, on the Monsignor? I don't know who that is, so.
Actually, I would like to, yeah, because I'd like to talk to him. He was a fan.
And then I can talk to the National Park Service to see how I can, if we can include those 2 structures, 2 sites in the day and get back to you, so.
Charlie, would you like to reach out to Greg Gordon yourself?
Do you know
or
him, Ray?
I don't know him personally. I only know him from our
Well, if you got his
interactions.
phone number, I'll reach out to him, because I've
Yeah,
been wanting to
I'll
do
get
that
you his
for-
number. Is it okay for me to do that?
Share a
Communicate-
phone number?
Yeah, communicate. Is that? Yeah, that's
No,
fine.
you can share a phone number, you just
Yeah.
can't,
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll send Charlie the
Yeah,
number.
the important thing, because actually, I heard 3 people possibly say they wanted to talk to Monsignor. That's one too many. Yeah, only 2 of you could work on a task together, and you cannot talk to other members about that task outside of the meeting, so be grateful for that.
Yeah, because I would really like to talk to him about a lot of things.
Confession. Oh, sorry.
But no, I'm not going to do that. You know, no, okay.
So I think we've got a good outline for our January meeting. We'll dig out the the schedule and see where we plug in this, that, and the other, and talk about mapping and presentations and that kind of thing.
Unless I get any other drafts from other committee members in the meantime, what I would do next month is say, well, here's a sample task list for the event last year.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, and then provide another format with a bunch of blank lines.
Yep.
You know, and then hopefully you folks, not necessarily at the meeting, but afterwards, can then we coordinate with staff, you know, so we can fill in the blanks.
And by the way, this sort of all hinges on the railroad being willing to participate at some level. So if I come back and they say, no, we don't want to talk to you, then
So is it okay if you find out before that January meeting that it's a no-go? We need to know that sooner
Well, yeah.
rather than January. Is it okay that he tells me that?
I can tell them. Well, I could tell
Or
Mike.
tell the staff?
Yeah, tell
just
tell
do it.
us, and then
Yeah.
we can email you as a group.
Yeah, right,
Thank
yeah.
you.
No, I'd let Michael know
Okay.
if there's a problem. I don't foresee that there would be, but,
publicity for them.
yeah.
So do we need to talk about the award? Were there any changes to the criteria for nomination as well as review of the applications? I think there's a note in here that Charlie wanted something changed.
Well, and Susan has talked about that. I mean, I thought that, and I still do, but I understand that it is probably
Oh, I
not
see.
important, but I thought that the nominee ought to at least be a contributing building. But as Susan has pointed out, and actually I agree with it, that we don't really, people can nominate whatever they want. We don't have to make the award to a building that's non-contributing. So no, I don't have any changes to the,
Okay.
It worked last year, so.
No, I agree. It can be a condition of us selecting the winner, but to nominate, I don't think we need to
but
say
yeah,
anything.
and to let them nominate whatever, because we had a nomination last year, it wasn't even in the district, so, whatever. And that is one of the criteria, it's gotta be within the district, so.
Okay. All right, moving on. Agenda number 9, possible action, discussion on public outreach to promote historic preservation matters. Do we want to keep this on our agenda, or do we just want to perhaps leave this off as a, recurring thing, agenda item, and then maybe keep it maybe at the end of our meeting when it comes to possible agenda items for upcoming preservation meetings? I don't know, what do you think?
I think we should bring it back from Member Graham. She'd like to speak to us about it, it sounds like. So she's working
well,
on,
she-
she's working
yeah.
on an article, so should we bring it back?
May I ask, have you spoken to her about this?
No.
Or are you just going by comments from months ago?
No, just, I assumed that this statement, Member Graham said she'd been working on an article about the Browder Building. Had she requested that we bring this back
No.
for this
that-
meeting? Oh, I misunderstood.
Yeah, no, the comment was just that, was it June? I'm sorry, whenever, it's been a few months since it was last discussed.
Mm-hmm.
September,
And it says Member Graham requested that this item come back
well,
in November. So
right.
I just figured since she's not here, maybe we just bring it back again to the next meeting when she is here, in case she does have.
How about this? I will contact Linda and find out if she's
Great.
made any progress. If she hasn't, I will not put it on the agenda, but as Chairman Davenport noted, whenever any committee member has a great idea that you want to propose on this topic, you just bring it up under the last item on the agenda for items you want to bring forward at the next meeting. You know, so that way then, if somebody's got something concrete that they want to share with the committee or suggest to the committee, we will be happy to put it on the following month's
Very good.
agenda. We're always willing to do that. It just doesn't necessarily make sense to keep kicking a certain can down the road if, you know, it's not being worked on.
I think what I might do,
You turned to my
when we
comment.
get to that agenda item, I'll have some suggestions, so, never mind.
10.
For possible action, approval of meeting calendar for 2023?
We, like most years, the fourth Wednesday in November usually falls too close to Thanksgiving. So the draft calendar on page 208, if you could let us know whether you have a preference for shifting your November meeting to the last Tuesday or the last Wednesday in November. As you know, for this year, you had actually chosen the last Tuesday, but there was an emergency council meeting that had to be scheduled that day, so that's why we're meeting today.
I'm good with either. Maybe Wednesday, keeping it on the Wednesday is fine with me.
I'm retired, I have no preference, either one.
What is the date of Thanksgiving?
It must be, hold it.
The
I'm
fourth.
sorry, I believe in November, that's a fifth Wednesday, so Thanksgiving is the week before. I apologize if I'm, so it's,
I can't figure that out. Yeah, I
Well,
gotta look at a
Yeah,
calendar.
but mine doesn't, I don't know which
so
day.
in either case, both of these dates are the week after Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving is the
Yeah, it's
23rd?
better
Yeah.
word, 23rd.
Oh, I see, okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, we're looking at 23, yeah.
Well,
So 23, and so this would be.
The
either
22nd is the
20 So we'd be the 28th or the
29th,
29th, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so either one doesn't matter.
I guess I would go with 29th, Wednesday, the same old time.
Oh, you don't want to do it the day before Thanksgiving?
No,
No.
it's not a possibility.
Both are the
Okay.
week after Thanksgiving. We don't want you to meet the night before Thanksgiving,
no.
and neither do you.
It doesn't make any difference to me, I mean.
I gotta be somewhere.
If 29th works for me, if that works for everybody else, I'm
Copy.
fine with that, but
Yep.
I'm easy.
It's probably best if somebody makes a motion.
I'll make a motion that we have our November meeting for 2023 on November 29th at 5 PM on Wednesday.
Great.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say
Aye.
aye. Aye. Okay.
Now I just gotta get my calendar back to.
Agenda number 11, for possible action, discussion update on the status of properties in the historic district or other potentially eligible properties.
Park Place addition. I meant to go look at this, the addition at the rear of the home.
Can you describe why it doesn't meet the guidelines? Is it because it's at the rear of the home, and by default it doesn't meet the guidelines?
No. None of this has to do with, no, the point of this is to let you know what permits have been approved in the last month. And because the addition as it is at the rear of the home, the guidelines, I'm sorry, you're right, I should not have put item 2, unless, actually, no, I deliberately looked at this. I believe there are no guidelines adopted for that address.
So wouldn't it be not applicable rather than no?
Well, no, I mean,
Because here it says that it insinuates that there are guidelines
No,
and it doesn't meet the guidelines.
no, it's not, there are no guidelines for it to meet. So the column that says, have guidelines been adopted? And the answer is no, because item 2, guidelines
Oh,
do not
gotcha.
apply to the subject address, meaning
Okay.
there are no guidelines. And then for pretty much all of them, I added a new item 9. It was made under because going forward, we're going to have some permits that will have come in under the old code versus the new code. But for 705 Park Place, guidelines don't apply because there are no guidelines for that address. Not
Okay.
all addresses in the district have guidelines.
Okay.
But that will change.
Correct. I mean,
That
then
will
it,
change with the new guidelines.
right, then it'll be based on contributing or non-contributing.
Right, yeah, yeah.
Thank you. And there's a note here that, Michael, you have some updates on the water filtration plant?
I've received a draft agreement from SHPO, currently reviewing it, and the goal would be to take it to the city council for approval in the next month and a half.
What did you get from the SHPO?
The agreement, this is the CCCHP agreement.
Oh, so they did award us?
Yeah,
money.
yeah, I
Oh,
shared that
maybe s-
before, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I thought it was considered okay,
yeah.
Well, you were here last.
Well,
sorry. Thank you.
and it's not official until both SHPO and the city agree to the grant anyway, the grant agreement, so.
And I'm sorry, you have to take this before city council even though they did approve the funding, the matching part?
So the city council adopted in the budget funds for this project.
Mhm.
But anytime you enter into an interlocal with another government entity, that requires approval by the city council.
Gotcha. And which meeting, city council meeting, will you present that to? Do you know yet?
Don't know yet.
Okay.
We have just received it, and so we're going to be reviewing it. Different staff will be reviewing it, and then when it's ready, take it to the council.
Well, I hope the council approves it. That'd be great.
Susan, can I ask a question about the 418 Ash? Install fence pilasters, and the guidelines adopted, it said yes. Are there guidelines for the,
There are guidelines for the address, the general guidelines for Ash, Birch, and Cherry Street homes. And those general guidelines say that, grassy front yards, uninterrupted grassy front yards.
oh.
Oh, and I'm sorry, perhaps I left but the instance, and there are guidelines adopted for the home, but there are not specific guidelines to fences.
Well,
So
that's what
I apologize. I mean, I've been trying to figure out how to revise this form
Yeah,
in
yeah.
relation to the new code, so
Yeah.
it's a work in progress.
Because I
so.
thought that was one of the problems with the fence. There weren't any guidelines for fences.
There are no specific guidelines for fences.
Fences, so, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, all right, okay.
All right, final agenda item, number 12, for possible action, commission discussion regarding potential agenda items for upcoming Historic Preservation Commission meetings. So just to throw this out here, a suggestion, I think it would be helpful to perhaps list some topics, subjects to tickle our brain as far as what maybe we want to add to an agenda, such as public outreach. We'll go down the list. Does anybody want to talk about public outreach at the next meeting? CLG status. Is there a need to talk about CLG status at the next meeting? Just kind of a list that is there that would help us figure out what needs to be on the next agenda.
Why not?
Concentrate on Historic Preservation Day,
Well,
I
yeah,
don't have
the next
anything.
agenda, Yeah, I mean, I have things I want to talk about relative to CLG, but not really in the next meeting, so But at some future date,
Well, when you get to that point where you know at that meeting that you want to talk about the CLG, that's when you would say,
That's
I
when
want to
I
talk
would
about the
say,
CLG
yeah.
at meeting blah, blah, blah. Okay.
I got just a question, you know, we've had some, with the grant applications today and stuff, there's a lot of questions, pro, con, can we do this, can we not do this? Do we wanna spend some time trying to clarify some things, or talk about what we can do to clarify things? I mean, not necessarily get anything accomplished, but at least maybe start figuring out so we don't have these issues coming again, and, so that we can maybe come up with a way of smoothing the process out at our meeting so we don't have all these questions.
So that was I had alluded to that and was wondering, based on today's meeting and the discrepancies and the confusion, is there a possibility for staff to have a look at the current grant guidelines and see are there places where we could fix some of those discrepancies or those problems? Or are you looking to the committee to, I mean, I don't have the notes to say, well, exactly which, part is wrong or could be elaborated on.
Well, I think we're never going to be able to avoid, interpretations by the public as to how to apply the guidelines. So, but I'd be happy to bring the guidelines back to the commission next month, and we as staff can evaluate them and see if there's any recommended changes. And then if there is a recommendation by the commission to make proposed changes, then we would take that to the city council for consideration.
Yeah, Michael, and I don't want to be too combative about this, but I can foresee the way the criteria for the grants are written, we're going to have this problem with every window that comes up, because the way they're written, if they have a wooden window, they got to replace it with a wooden window. And unless you're successful in finding somebody that can, we're going to have this same problem every single time.
Well,
So I would suggest, I don't think that's your interpretation. I think there's a different interpretation, but we got to justify that interpretation. And the interpretation of using a using windows, placing wooden windows with non-wood windows, I think is okay, but we have to justify when is that okay?
Yeah, okay.
Um,
Like I said, I think there's loopholes in there.
And that's,
so, Madam Chair, so we're not discussing it now. Why
No,
don't I
yeah,
just bring it back for next month, and you can have this free and open conversation about interpretations, guidelines, and
Yeah, let's just get on the agenda, we can beat ourselves up some more.
thank you, Glenn. So Historic Preservation Day and returning to the grant, the residential grant guidelines. Anything else that we need to talk about at our next meeting?
That should be a full agenda.
I think that's good.
I think that's plenty,
All right, great.
because there might be other things come up between now and then, get put on the agenda for more grant applications, or who knows?
All right.
Well, we haven't, because we might have a COA thing come up sometime. You never know.
So now is the final public comment period for the evening. The public may call 702-589-9629. Each person has up to 5 minutes to speak on any topic.
They're still awake.
We'll go to the men's room in a second.
Okay. You have 5 minutes.
Do I have to wait 5 minutes for these?
I know. Drives me nuts.
Sorry, you need to close the public hearing and then adjourn. Or public comment.
Hearing no one else, we will close the final public comment period. This meeting is adjourned.